Welcome. Welcome to DAX Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us on another edition of DAX Machina. And the first technical glitch is out of the way. For some reason, once again, the intro just stopped playing.
Got them early, man.
It's always got to be something, but we got it out of the way early tonight, so hopefully we won't have any more glitches. Folks, I'm glad you guys are with us tonight. We're going to have a great time tonight. Joining me in the studio is Robbie Rip Rains, my brother from South Crackalacky. Steve Wildman Monrodis, the OG of the podcast, and the founder of the very special drink called The South Boston, which we will talk about later. And my son, Noah Roberts, a.k.a. Jorgamunder from twitch.tv/Jorgamunder.
That's me.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing great.
All right. Yeah, Noah has hair. I just normally wear hats.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
just
something looks different about you.
I finally had
I
a day
wear
where my
hats
hair
to cut
looked
down
all
on the
right.
glare.
I finally had one of those days where my hair wasn't just like deflated across my face, and I didn't look like an early 2000s emo kid.
Northwoods is on the scoreboard early, folks.
X is proof. Felt that, Bubba. Felt that. Oh, man.
Big howdy to everybody tonight. We're getting a lot of howdies from everybody. Folks, appreciate you guys joining us. We've already got, 60 some odd people in the chat, and we are just on the air for just a couple minutes. Folks, thank you guys for joining us tonight. William Nighthawk says, sorry, Billy, didn't mean to cause the glitch in your matrix. There's lots of glitches in our matrix. Folks, if you haven't had a chance to go over and subscribe to William's new channel, he's got a new channel up and running after YouTube got rid of it. Yeah, YouTubed his old one. So, but run by his channel and let's get him some numbers back up to work. So tonight, folks, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and people of all shapes and sizes, myself included. Well, tonight we are going to be talking about giants, and I don't just mean my belt size.
Yeah, remember your audience here. That cuts a little close to the skin there, DA.
Hey, my belt cuts too close to the skin all the time, man. I told my tailor I wear a size 40 around the waist, and that's a lie. I'm a 42 on a good day.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. Yeah, I would say big men run in our family, but let's face it, nobody runs in our family.
Hey, to be fair, I have started running. Well, someone's got to break the tradition,
Y'all see me running, that means somebody's chasing me.
When I was in high school, I had six-pack abs. I've gotten older. Now I have pony keg abs. Whatever. It's all the same.
I just got a keg.
I'm in shape. Round is a shape. Jessica's in the house. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, Jessica.
Abnormal Investigations is here too. Awesome. So, folks, we're going to be talking about giants tonight, and I don't just mean the ones from movies like Clash of the Titans and things like that. I'm talking about legitimate findings of the possible existence of giants down through our own history, in oral traditions, existing in oral traditions of indigenous people, as well as in religions from all walks of life. So the concept of a giant is nothing new, and as we've discussed on the show before, giant skeletons have been found all around the United States. But the thing is people don't really realize exactly how many have been found. And the map I'm about to put up is just the ones found here in the United States. I haven't been able to find a good source to show the world, but this is the locations of giant skeletons that have been found in the United States, and it's either been covered up or completely dismissed. And some of these are in excess of 12 feet tall. A good chunk of those could probably be explained by giantism, because giantism exists in all species, and we've seen, the outlying marker here and there of a person like, for example, some of the guys that are in the Guinness Book of World Records, or the guys that play for the NBA. When our ancestors first got here, somebody that stood 7 feet tall would have been considered a giant, because average height back then was what, 5'4", 5'5", maybe 5'6".
Yep.
But some of these are not like that. I mean, granted, the tallest man ever, and according to the Guinness Book of World Records, was like 8 feet 11 inches tall, and that's a big boy. But some of the skeletons, like the ones found in Lovelock Cave, were 12 feet and over. And in some cases, even bigger.
Yeah, you're
For
not talking
example,
about Yao Ming here. You're talking about legit giants.
I mean, there are cultural stories of giants all over the world. I mean, look at the Celtic belief in the Fomorian giants. Look at the Norse belief in not just the Jotuns, but in the Muspels and the what was the name of the Earth giants?
Ettins.
Something like that. Yeah. And I mean, like I mean, even like early American tribes had stories of giants. I don't remember what they were called, but I mean there were multiple tellings all over the Americas, over Europe, in China, and in Asia, and I mean even in Africa. Like there's tellings of giants all over the world. So I mean, like,
Well, even in modern Bigfoot circles, they talk about some of the Bigfoot being 12, 13, even 15 feet tall. And then, of course, if you look at the different types of Bigfoot that have been supposedly spotted out in the extreme wildernesses, well, the ones they refer to as mountain giants, and those get really big. So it's not like this is a new concept. This is something that people are just started talking about. I mean, for example, this chart here, these are skeletal remains that have been, or just a few of the giant human remains that have been unearthed, documented in historical records, along with the historical accounts of Goliath, who had 3 brothers as big as he was. Og, king of Bashan, whose bed was 13.5 feet long, and Maximus Thrax, a Caesar of Rome. You take a look at some of these. A modern day man is 6 feet tall. Then you've got Maximus Thrax, who's 8 feet 6. There was the one from Turkey was recorded at 15 feet. Goliath was allegedly 10 feet 6 inches tall. Og, the king of the Bashan, raging in at 12 feet tall. Looking at all the way through those, this one in France, 25 feet 6 inches tall, unearthed along a river, near the castle of Chaumont, nearly a complete skeleton. And then another one found by the Carthaginians at 36 feet tall. A pair of them were found. These aren't just your average person who happened to have giantism. There's no way a human body could get that big and its muscle structure support it. I mean, look at the guys in the Guinness Book of Records, World Records. These guys over 8 feet tall generally had leg braces and walked with canes. Steve, you're muted, buddy.
do you see Jimmy's comment, Dad?
There we go. I was going to say
I'm
Robert
not even looking
Wadlow,
at the comments.
died of connective tissue issues.
I'll put it up.
He was in his 20s, 30s when he passed away.
That's the one you're talking about now?
Yeah, that is.
Jimmy, we'll get to the Kandahar ones, but I wanted to talk about the Australian Aboriginal ones. There's no way I'm going to be able to pronounce that. So supposedly, if I remember correctly, Jimmy, or Jimmy or Toom, can you chime in on this? There's a giant like red mesa in the middle of nowhere in Australia that's supposed to be home of giants. If I remember the lore I read correctly. Ryan from Monster Radio says the Algonquin spoke of giants rather often. The Genosqua were just one type. And not all of them were hairy. If you guys remember the show we did on the Lost Colony of Roanoke, I found an account from John Smith's journal where he said he traded with the Susquehannock, who were considered giants. And I found something to kind of back that up. This is supposedly the skeleton of of a Susquehannock. So several of the Susquehannock Andaste remains found in Athens, Pennsylvania, were said to be between 6 and 7 feet tall. The average European height at the times were those of the Susquehannock. The times of these Susquehannocks were around 4 to 5.3 feet. So yeah, they would have dwarfed Europeans. But the Susquehannock, that name keeps coming up. I found that in numerous pieces of lore. Then of course we've got what we talked about just the other day, the Sul Kaloo from Cherokee myth. The Cherokee said the Sul Kaloo were a race of giants. The one in particular, what was the name of that rock? Judiculla, the Judiculla rock, where there's a massive massive 7-fingered handprint in it. But supposedly this thing was able to jump from mountain to mountain. And now, while I figure that's probably an exaggeration from storytelling, but it wouldn't be unheard of for something that big to leap distances or leap across a gorge or something like that, where it would absolutely blow the minds of people of normal size. What do you guys think?
I mean, there's a lot of correlation between the Judiculla and what was it?
Yeah, they found Ogham's script on the Judiculla rock,
which I mean would make it consistent with not necessarily specifically a Fomorian, but I mean the settlers that arrived might have believed that the Sul Kaloo was a type of Fomorian.
Well, then if you look back and accept that these are an ancient race, possibly even predating humankind. If you look at the continental drift before the continents separated, the mountain range that we call the Appalachians is the same mountain range that runs through Ireland and Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
My big struggle with this whole concept, though, is the biology behind it. I can't get the square cubed law out of my head. Metabolically, how are we supporting this with normal metabolisms? And like you said, the muscle structure. There's a limit to how big animals could get before they just don't hold themselves together anymore. Or their metabolic demands become too high to process under any method we know. I don't know. There's a lot of high strangeness going on with that.
Well, looking at Bigfoot physiology, a Bigfoot that was, say 12 feet tall, that's not the same physiology as a human. Like you mentioned, Robert Wadlow, he had to walk with leg braces and a cane. In fact,
Yep.
The reason he died was when an ill-fitting leg brace caused an abscess, and his metabolism just couldn't recover from it, and he died at a very young age.
Yep.
So
26. Nighthawk called me out on that. 26 years old. Yeah.
I completely. Sorry, Robbie. Go ahead.
Would oxygenation, higher oxygenation, would that make a difference in how that works?
I would think in a high oxygen environment, like maybe the Carboniferous era of geology time, maybe. Well, I mean, it worked with the other megafauna. That's where we ended up with 2-foot diameter dragonflies.
Not to steer this in that direction, but it does tend to believe that back then, before the flood, if you believe in that, we more or less lived in a terrarium. We had that bubble that was a very oxygen-rich environment, so people probably would have grown bigger during that time, just like animals did. I mean, that would be one way to support. Yeah, and live longer, and that's an explanation for reptiles and how you think about dinosaurs. Most reptiles grow their entire life; they never stop growing. As long as they're living, they grow. So, if an iguana lived 1,000 years, how big would it be in 1,000 years?
Right. Well, you had a steady food source.
Yeah. So, maybe that's a good starting point. Is just a higher oxygen. Whether you believe it biblically or not.
Yeah.
Just if it was more of an oxygen-rich environment back then, that could have lent to some of that.
You know, you're doing a comparative anatomy on what we suspect of Sasquatch that get that big. Yes, they walk upright. They walk upright and therefore have a certain resemblance to humans, but their skeletal structure would be entirely different. The bone structure would be much thicker. Muscle would be much thicker. I mean, you know, like you were talking about megafauna. Look at the size that some of the animals got back then. And it's not entirely, you know, outside the realm of possibility that even certain members of the megafauna might still exist. There are places up in remote Canada and Alaska where they believe there might still be mastodons. So, you know, it's not like there's not a precedent for some type of creature having the physiology to support a frame that big, just not humans. The way where our bodies are built, you know, we don't have the bone density or the muscle structure to support a frame that big. I mean, look, you know, again, Robert Wadlow, he was a big man. He, you know, was well over 8 feet tall, but yeah, his knees and his legs didn't want to support him. He had to wear leg braces. He walked with a cane. However, average Sasquatch height seemed to be put it in range with him. You know, 7, 8, and 9 feet tall seems to be a common sighting. So what's so different about these things that sets them apart and allows them to walk like this? So if these giants are indeed getting that big, we can't really compare them to human anatomy other than the fact that they walked upright, because their physiology would be completely different.
One thing that I want to point out, and this is purely from a logical standpoint, for something to be that size and us to not notice it hunting, it would have to be at least a more herbivore inclined omnivore than a carnivore, because you would notice the hunting patterns. You would notice, oh shit, in this area, there's no wildlife. Nothing goes in this area. There are trees being uprooted. Like, for something to be that size and to be existing, it would have to be getting its energy mostly from plants because of how noticeable its hunting pattern would be. Because you got to think of how many calories that something that size would have to take in. Like, I mean, look at Dwayne Johnson's freaking caloric intake. Like, dude has to get like I think it's like 10 times my daily intake of calories. So for something that size to support itself, sprinting around in the woods and pushing rocks and shit all the time, it would have to be taking in an inane amount of calories.
Well, we've talked
Plus,
about
it's got
that
a really slow metabolism.
With Brian Shaw, the 4-time world's strongest man, 6'8", 400 something pounds. He takes in 25,000+ calories a day. And if I'm
a lot of calories,
higher than that, but that's he eats like 6 meals a day, and each one of them is 10 or 12 to 15,000 calories a meal. So I mean, and that's just a natural. That's just a human.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I'm getting at. Is like, look at some of these power lifters and whatnot that have this massive diet they have to support, and then take into account something that is much more shredded than they are, much larger than they are. How many calories would that thing have to take in? Even if it's got a slower metabolism, like, you still have to equate them similarly.
Well, yeah, it would be a lot. Well, we had a question about that picture that's part of the thumbnail, and this is part of that. These are part of the remains that were found in Lovelock Cave, Nevada. In 1911, mummified remains were found by guano hunters in Lovelock Cave, a large rock shelter in Nevada's Lake Lahontan region. According to legend, these skeletons belong to a cannibalistic tribe of red-haired giants, known to the Paiute Indians as the Sitka. These cannibals were at war with the Paiute until a number of tribes came together and trapped the Sitka in Lovelock Cave and started a fire and asphyxiated them. These remains were found. It's documented. We've got photographic pictures right here, and again, we know photos. We all know how photos can be manipulated, but there's documentation that these skeletons were not only found, but they were put on display in a museum in Lovelock, Nevada. And lo and behold, after they'd been on display for a little while, the the Smithsonian asked to study them. The museum in Lovelock still has the receipt given to them by the Smithsonian, but the Smithsonian now claims to have no record of ever receiving the specimens and cannot find them.
And
things that make you go,
Right.
You know, we've jumped down that rabbit hole before, but just to retouch on that in case nobody was here when we were talking about that. My running theory with that is not necessarily that there's one specific organization or person doing it, but you'd have instances where, like, say, the Vatican might pose as the Smithsonian and be like, hey, turn this over to us, we're the Smithsonian. You turn it over to them and it disappears forever. You know what I mean?
Right.
These mystical artifacts, these things that might disprove the way one person wants history to be recounted. You know what I mean?
But yeah, that's not uncommon. Well, specifically, or certain organizations that claim to be bastions of knowledge, getting rid of information, getting rid of
knowledge.
Yeah, well, not only hoarding it, but destroying evidence of stuff that's contrary to their theories. The British museums used to do it all the time.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot that has been hidden, particularly on subjects like this, because what organization out there wants people to know that there are massive creatures out there? What organization would want that? Like, oh yeah, we've always been the apex predator. There's no other creature like us out there. And then someone somewhere just drops the bomb of, oh hey everyone, we are not the apex predator.
But they could at least come forward and say, we discovered these as fossilized remains. They existed at some point in history. But that would set a lot of theologians on their ear to admit these things are out there. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking any one particular religion. I'm talking a lot of people around the world would be very upset if it was brought to light that these things really do exist. So I truly believe they're out there. Derek Buckles has a question. This is probably for Steve, because he's more the scientist than I am. Derek says, would the oxygenation rate affect size and abilities, transfer of O2 in the lungs?
I would think it would probably be the other way around, that you would need to have different mechanisms of oxygen transfer to support something that big.
It had completely different metabolism than what we have.
Yeah, or different structure of things. Our lungs, when you boil it down in terms of some other critters out in the natural world, really aren't that efficient. We require a significant
well, that's because you have asthma.
But we dedicate a significant internal volume to the management of air, and we have all these air sacs, these alveoli in our lungs, and then the only parts of them that actually are active in respiration are the surface areas. All that other internal volume is just airspace. It's not really airspace, even dead space, because all the oxygen transfer happens at the membrane.
Right.
I would think we've got to have something more efficient to manage something that big. I keep coming back to when I was a kid watching Andre Rusumov, Andre the Giant, when he was wrestling. I think he was like 7'4", I think, when he died, and he just watching him walk. Like, he didn't even walk like a normal person because he couldn't. It was just kind of unusual.
Yeah. Well, anybody that gets that big, well, even let's just say, for example, a bodybuilder. Once they get that much mass, they lose the ability to do certain things. Like there was the old joke that you can bench press 600 pounds, but you can't throw a football because their arm doesn't rotate like that.
Right.
Well, I mean, just look at Ronnie Coleman. Look how many health problems he's had because he was so big and lifted such heavy weight his entire. Most bodybuilders will use lighter weight with more reps just to get the fullness and the size for the look. But Ronnie was like, no, I want mine functional. As far as he said, everybody wants to get big, nobody wants to lift heavy weights. And Ronnie was probably the first one to do a 800-pound deadlift, which at the time that he was doing it, that was unheard of, especially for a bodybuilder. But he's paid for it he's had like 7 back surgeries. And you see the guy now, his arms are still huge. His chest is still huge, but his legs are about that big around now because of all the surgeries he's had and all the atrophy that he's had in his legs. Because, like you said, Steve, we're not meant to carry that much mass around. And it's just
so. I keep tossing Bigfoot back in as an example. If Bigfoot truly is bipedal, its bone structure has got to be so much more dense than ours. Its musculature is going to be very different. And then again, we get a lot of reports of people seeing Bigfoot moving quadrupedally, going down on their knuckles like a gorilla. So are they full time? Are they full time bipedal, or is that only something they do in short bursts?
Well, think about the walk that we've seen on all these, how much different the gait and the stride is on that. That proves right there that their musculature and their bone structure works differently than ours, because humans can't walk like they do. That's probably an adaptation to carry that size and mass, because their joints and bones and muscles and everything don't work together exactly the same way that ours does. So there's got to be something that compensates for that. That's why when you get these hybrids like a liger, it gets super huge, but they don't live that long because they don't have the adaptations for the bodies to manage that.
Robert D. He says, Bigfoot's arms and legs are not like ours, and I just meant that they resemble ours when people are describing it being like an upright person. We know anatomy-wise, they've got their limbs morphology have got to be totally different than ours. But the fact that they resemble us kicks in our uncanny valley, kicks in that fear of something that looks like a human. And could very well be considered a giant. When the Vikings had their first settlement in Vinland, they talked about doing battle with what they referred to as the Skraelings, a giant hairy tribe of cannibals. When the giants in Lovelock Cave, when the Paiute were being eaten by these things, they banded together and built a fire at the front of this cave and basically starved them for oxygen. So they couldn't get through the fire and they couldn't get any air. That's how they killed these giant these giants in here, and they were described as massive red-headed cannibals. When from the descriptions, sounds very, 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 very similar to the descriptions given from, you guessed it, the giants of Kandahar. Almost to the same thing. They were massive cave-dwelling creatures that preyed on humans. What does that say about that? What does our theory said about Bigfoot and other cryptids using these underground cave networks, either as a highway or being able to exist much farther down than we're capable of getting?
Well, feasting on humans makes more sense. Noah made a very good point that, for the purpose of what's the word I'm looking for? Not camouflage, for the purpose of not being noticed. It probably isn't, great for these giants to, wipe out all the large fauna in an area, because all the naturals were like, oh, is there suddenly no bears, no lions, nothing else big out here?
Exactly.
But the flip side of that is, you have to look at energy density too. The reason that it would make more sense for these things to get as big as they do is because they eat the apex predators. They eat the critters that have the highest energy concentration. You get more energy from eating a cow than from eating the grass. That's part of the reason we eat cows. Because we'd have to, for what we could get out of a 1 pound steak, we would have to eat probably 20, 30 pounds of grass. And you get even more energy from the critters that eat the cows, and whatever. There aren't too many things that eat people. And, given that what we eat, we'd be pretty energy dense and high in fat and high in alcohol and high in whatever else. But we'd be more energy dense because of the fact that we're higher up the food chain.
Now there is some exceptions to that rule though, Steve, because there are plenty of animals out there that when they do eat food, like when they do eat plants and whatnot, they conserve more of that energy over time, and that's how they're capable of sustaining themselves. Look at giraffes. Giraffes don't eat meat, and yet they're huge in support.
Elephants
They
aren't
support
meat eaters.
being that size, right? Because
Right.
of the way their dietary system works, they are capable of extracting more energy per ounce of food they eat, right? So, I mean, like you said about the respiratory system of one of these things, it would have to be different, right? So if the respiratory system is different, then we have to operate under the idea that pretty much its entire intestinal tract is going to be a lot different, right? So
it would make sense
for something to be that big, even if we take calories out of the equations, right? Even if we take calories out of the equation, it has to have something that will give it amino acids and proteins to support itself, which is the big thing for something with that much muscle and that much like fiber to its body, right? You'd have to have something that would give it starches, because having something that size and not getting starches is not a good idea. And sugars. Those are going to be your 4 primary things you need to support that size.
But I think what Steve was saying was, because even an elephant, like you said, does have good energy conserve, but it still has to eat 300 pounds of food a day. A lion doesn't have to eat 300 pounds of meat a day. But it eats an elephant or a giraffe or something like that.
Think about being out in the woods, right? If you're out in the woods and you eat only plants, you have it's all over the place. It's abundant. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But we're also assuming that their metabolism would be something like ours. What if their metabolism is somewhere between us and, say, a reptile? Look at an alligator. Let's say you've got we'll use a Nile croc. Let's say you've got a 22 foot Nile crocodile like Gustav. He doesn't have to feed very often. One big meal will last him for weeks.
Yeah,
or months even.
Yeah. I mean that could definitely take it into account, because, like, I mean, following up on what Steve was saying about eating the apex predator and getting the most energy per pound, right? If that is the case, maybe it eats a bear every few months. One bear disappearance isn't going to stand out, but
it'll probably also spend a great deal of its time resting.
If it functions not too dissimilar from humans, it would have to take in a lot of calories. But if we're operating under the idea that it can conserve that food, then I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be able to just, like, abduct a bear every now and then just be like, oh yeah, whatever.
Well, and the resting would make sense. And
we've got rock formations that have been found all over the world that show stuff like this, like a human-like footprint. This had to have been pressed into that rock while it was still mud before this calcified and became rock. And you got a human foot there for comparison. And this isn't the only case. I mean, I found quite a few of these. Here's another one. I mean, these are pressed into solid rock. There are thousands of photos like that out there. It's just crazy how they're finding these enormous footprints in solid rock, which means those things were there when those rock formations weren't rock. They've existed for a long time. It's completely illogical to think that there's no trace of them in modern times and that they didn't exist.
And I think operating under the idea that there was megafauna, and we had these giant animals, giant sloths, giant this, giant that, right? As far back as we've been able to date humans to existing, the time of megafauna and the time of humans existing are not far off.
There may have been some overlap. There
may have been some overlap, and I mean, if we're talking about an ecosystem where there are megafauna, there are massive creatures that you have to contest with and you have to compete with for food, logically, we would have to be at least much larger than we are now to stand a chance.
Yeah, it would
abnormal investigation says they're also different because Goliath had 6 toes and 6 fingers. The Kandahar giants were described as having 6-fingered hands, six toes, and double rows of teeth. Um, the Kandahar giant story really I find extremely compelling because not only did it happen in modern times, uh, it's for a story that has been desperately tried to be shut up. It just keeps getting more and more corroborations from different events, and I think it happened more than once. I don't think there was just one incident of U.S. military engaging these giants up in the caves of Afghanistan. And the reason I say this is, well, if Doc was here, Doc couldn't be with us tonight. Doc knows a guy who was a crew. It was a crew on one of the Spectre gunships that would fly in and out of some of the bases in Afghanistan. And they said at night they would pick up the heat thermals of these massive things up in the mountains.
I
Lene
was.
asked, oh, sorry, Steve, what?
Oh, go ahead, Noah.
I was just going to say, Lene asked if we think tribes of giants would still be out there.
If they are, I think they're probably below ground. Uh, I when people start talking about the hollow Earth theory, I don't think of it like most people do. I don't think it's like the Earth is a giant eggshell with another Earth inside it. I don't think that's it. I think hollow Earth to me really means more massive underground caverns, and we know some of these caverns are down there, and we know from studying the Challenger Deep and deepest parts of the ocean that. Steve, what do they call that when they bioluminescence? That's the word I'm looking for. Bioluminescence exists in the ocean. Why wouldn't it exist in some of these deep caves? They could have their own light without relying on the sun for light.
Well, we have mushrooms that do that.
Yep, bioluminescent fungi.
Or if they're deep enough, they could be getting light from magma.
Y'all look at this picture. Tell me what you think of it.
All right, shoot. It's another. Well, that looks like a human-like footprint next to what looks like possibly a dinosaur print.
Yeah.
Not next to it. Look at the dinosaur print and look at the human.
Yeah, the dinosaur print is on it.
Tell me what you said.
The dinosaur print is compressed.
So go back to your
print.
Listen, people.
So go back to your overlay. So you draw your own conclusion. My conclusion is dinosaurs and humans are at least something that look like humans existed together. Because that human print was first, and the dinosaur print was over top of that.
I think
it's entirely possible we've got the timelines wrong. Science doesn't know everything. Science is constantly trying to evaluate and relearn knowledge, or at least that's what they're supposed to do. I think the dinosaurs lived longer than they originally estimated because we already know it's like 1 in every million bodies becomes a fossil because the conditions to become a fossil are very specific. Not every animal that dies becomes a fossil. That's why you don't find a lot of fossil records from the megafauna days because a lot of those conditions just didn't exist anymore. How do we know that dinosaurs, what we could consider dinosaurs, lived a hell of a lot longer past those conditions where it was more common to make fossils? What if humans developed far earlier than we thought and dinosaurs were around far longer than they thought? We don't know for sure. This is all hypothesis. A certain amount of things can be backed up with like carbon dating and things like that, but even that's fallible.
Now, I've been thinking, I can't get it out of my head. That infographic that you showed at the beginning of the podcast with the layered sizes of giants. The 36. The 36 6-footer. That's just not normal biology. And
no,
I was thinking in plants, in some animals, there is a principle in biology called polyploidism. And basically, like for a daisy, for example, let's say a normal daisy has 2 copies of DNA. Well, if you can have a daisy with 4 copies of DNA, it's bigger. And you have a 6-copy, plant, this polyploidal DNA. And of course, the more copies of DNA you get, the bigger the flower gets. And you can have daisies the size of sunflowers because they're polyploidal. When you're talking about extra toes, extra teeth, in a humanoid figure, that could explain part of it. I mean, you get enough sets of, instead of having 2 copies of DNA like we do, get multiple sets together, and all of a sudden you've got something that's 6 times bigger than it should be,
and the ability to withstand the height change.
Right.
That's kind of
and
that's freaking brilliant,
I've never
Steve. I
seen
love
it in
that.
humans. I've never seen it in humans, but it makes sense. I mean, I stand corrected. We don't have 2 copies of DNA. We have 1 full copy made of 2 parents. But, let's say instead of having our normal collection of chromosomes, we have 2 complete sets of these chromosomes, 4 complete sets of these chromosomes, due to whatever process happened there. It would stand to reason they would just be bigger. And these polyploidal daisies, I keep thinking a picture of them in my high school biology book. They're no less healthy than the normal monoploidal daisies. They're just bigger. They do require more water. They do require sturdier soil because they are more massive. But I mean, I don't know. That's literally just off the top of my head. But
that makes a tremendous amount of sense.
I don't know. Things that make it.
So if that was possible that something like that could exist in non-plant life, that would be a wonderfully logical explanation on how these things got that big and still looked quote unquote humanoid.
Right. I wish that I would have prepared ahead of time. I deliberately go into these shows fresh because I think it's useful to have it's not really a reaction video, but have kind of the live reaction to the stuff. And so I go in cold, but that'd be something I want to look up now. It's got me curious. I don't know if it exists in any other critters. I've just seen examples in plants.
Well, it's I wouldn't say it would be unique in the animal kingdom. I mean, if it happened once, surely that pattern could be duplicated in another life form.
Well, it makes sense. And I mean, a plant, it's not like you're talking bacteria. It's another eukaryotic organism, just like humans and, other animals. I don't know.
What if some of these like really big ones, like the 35-footer that was on there, what if they were evolved for upright bipedal movement during a time when some of these, like at one time Death Valley was an ocean? What if this was a time when there was a lot more water on the land, but it wasn't deep? What if in order to forage and hunt, they had to basically be, part of them in the water?
Yeah, I would say that as far as from the nutritional standpoint, it would make a lot more sense for them to backdate to a time when the Ivanpa still had water in it. We're looking at these large creatures that would have had to have had an incredible diet. Like I mean truly remarkable diet. So I mean, for there to be large water sources for them would have. I mean, it would be entirely necessary. I mean, like you and I can't drink salt water, and who's to say that if they are like or human-ish, that they can drink salt water and salt water neither? Because I mean, like a lot of mammals on this planet, well, most land-based animals can't really drink salt water at all.
Right.
So I mean, like for something to be that size, it would need a lot of water intake, a lot of caloric intake if it's like human.
Well, again, folks, one thing I wanted to jump in and say for here for just a second is what we're discussing here is all theory. We're not claiming to be presenting 100%. This is what happened. We're putting out theories. We're gathering ideas. We're looking at these giants and trying to come up with ideas how they evolved or how they're even still here. Much like cryptids, there's not really any experts in this field. So anything you guys think of, just as valid as anything we're thinking of. But if what we're saying makes sense, let us know. Because I think especially in Steve's theory about the plants, about the doubling up on the DNA, I think that holds a hell of a lot of water.
Well, I was just doing some mad research here on my second screen in case anyone was wondering why I had my head turned up, not having a seizure. I was just reading about polyploidism, and with these plants, it's not uncommon to have ridiculous amounts of DNA sets. Like, for example, mulberry bushes have 44 sets of DNA. A normal human is diploid. These have 44 sets. But what never really concerned me, what interested me, is some of the highly differentiated cells in humans are already polyploidal. Like liver cells, for example, are polyploidal. Muscle cells, polyploidal. So it's possible in humans.
Yeah.
I mean, it's responsible for keeping us alive now. We're just not used to it being in all of our somatic cells, the whole rest of our bodies.
Right. Ave May says there are rumors of Volkswagen-sized shed spider skins found deep in Navajo lands. No thanks.
Yeah, no.
I am right there with you. A spider the size of a Volkswagen, that's call in the A10. I'm not getting anywhere near it.
Yeah, small arms fire is not going to punch that exoskeleton.
Nope.
Yeah, that ain't gonna be the size of a Volkswagen for me to not want to have anything to do with a spider. I mean, most tarantulas.
I don't like dealing with ones this big, let alone the size of a
honestly, full disclosure, I'd rather deal with bigger spiders than smaller spiders because at least I know where they're at and where they're going.
Maybe.
But another thing I'd like to clarify is Steve has an abundance of medical training. So when he talks about stuff like the medical side of things, I wouldn't dismiss anything he says. And in my case, I was taking culinary and nutrition classes for 6 years. So I know a couple of things about nutrition. I would hope. I'm not just talking out my ass up here.
Well, we all have different backgrounds that we're bringing stuff to the table, and you know stuff that I will never know. I have the advantage. I worked in healthcare a long time. I'm a microbiologist, but I know a lot about little things. My knowledge is much more limited, not general knowledge. And like you said, the culinary stuff. I mean, more about metabolism than I'll ever know. I had a metabolism. I went away 250, man.
Hey, man. If I knew an abundance about metabolism, maybe I could do something about this belly. But like,
Northwoods may be onto something. Just forget the A10 for that big of a spider. Call in the B-52s loaded with fuel air bombs.
Napalm.
Yeah, seriously. Unless Bass Pro starts selling depleted uranium rounds for my AR platform, I don't want anything to do with the spiders. Yeah,
a spider that big, that would be much like in my book, The Nightmare Hunter. That would be changing the face of the have to draw a new topographical map after we were done. Smedley Do Right says maybe it's a friendly spider. I don't know that I'd want to get close enough to find out.
I keep thinking of the Krakatoa volcanic eruption. It goes on record as being the loudest sound ever recorded in human history. And then you see the giant spider, and some redneck goes, "Hold my beer and watch this."
Hey, maybe dragon's breath rounds might work on one.
Might just piss it off if it's that.
I mean, you'd be setting it on fire. I mean, nothing likes being set on fire.
Good point.
I can't think of anything on this planet that would like to be set on fire.
Louis Noriega is talking about the bird-eating spider. Those are nasty. Those are big spiders.
More tombstones, pets.
Yeah. Why is it everything in Australia is out to get you?
Everything in Tombstone's backyard is deadly, including Tombstone.
Including Tombstone. But that's awesome that you've found that those doubled up and quadrupled up and even more DNA strands exist in more than just that one example, because it means if it's existing across multiple different things, there's no reason at all why it couldn't exist in some sort of species of human-like being.
Oh yeah, well like I said, humans are diploid. We have two sets. Our gametes, or sperm and egg cells, are haploid, so they're half the normal set. Things like fire ants, are haploid their entire lives. I mean, look at it like, tetraploids, so 4 sets. Okay, cotton is tetraploidal. Wheat is hexaploidal. And it gives us different examples. Sturgeon have 8 sets of DNA. Strawberries,
that's an animal.
10 sets. And it's really interesting. And then like you get to the black mulberry has 44 sets of DNA.
So it's not outside the realm of possibility that these creatures that are so much bigger than us have multiple sets of this in their DNA, and could easily explain why they have frames that can support a much larger size.
Well, and just because they have more sets doesn't mean it makes them more alien or necessitates that they're more alien either. Like, for example, seedless watermelons and tardigrades both have 3 sets of DNA. There's not a whole lot of comparison between a tardigrade and a seedless watermelon, but they have that same characteristic, and I don't know. It's got me thinking. It's one more thing to.
Well, if multiple sets in that daisy would make it hardier, thicker, heavier, and require more soil to stand up in, and make it but still healthy. If that happened in a humanoid. Not saying necessarily a human, but a humanoid, it would support a much bigger frame size. It would explain, heavier bone density. It would explain much heavier bone mass. But then again, at that point, we have no idea what the metabolism would be like.
Well, and the thing I was thinking with that daisy is that polyploidal daisy is still proportioned exactly like the normal size daisy. It's just bigger. It's like you took a projector and cranked it out to a further distance. It's just overall bigger. That 36-foot tall humanoid, assuming that the real one was proportioned like your graph, it's still proportioned like a normal human.
Yeah. Well, that may have just been. That may have been a drawing because I don't. Well, it was found by the Carthaginians, so there's no photos. All we have is the record that they discovered it. So it's not like they know exactly what the skeletons look like. Sergeant Deacon had a good point. Just not to change the topic, but did y'all see Neoma's Finn about the video from Neoma Finn's video from the storm about storm damage? Yeah, Miss Neoma's got some pretty nasty storm damage. Tree fell on her house, so y'all. She's okay. Her and her husband are both fine. There's just some damage. So guys, keep an extra prayer for her tonight. They've got a lot of cleanup to do, and fortunately nobody was hurt. So that's a definite plus.
Things can be replaced.
Yeah,
it costs you an arm and a leg, and the insurance company don't like you very much, but they can be replaced.
I don't think insurance companies like anybody very much.
No, they don't like paying out. That's not what they're there for.
If you pay them loads of money and never have a call with them, they'll keep taking your money and they will treat you adequately. But the second you call them and are like, "Hey, I need to cash in on my insurance policy," they're like, "You."
They exist to collect premiums and deny claims.
But yeah, going back on the density of muscle tissue and whatnot. I mean, think about how much heavier something like that would be than us. Thinking about if its muscle mass has 2 times the DNA ours does, right? Mm-hmm. Think about how much heavier that muscle is going to be. Think about how much heavier those bones are going to be.
I would explain why hunters who claim that they're sure of their shots had put deer hunting rounds into some of these things, some of the Bigfoot type creatures, and had little to no effect. Robbie and I had postulated many times that stress under fire sometimes makes you think you hit a target, but you were wide. But what if they did hit it and it just wasn't enough to punch?
And I mean, sure, in some cases you have things that are the same size that weigh a lot more. I mean, look at this thing of chapstick here, right? If this was made of solid lead, it would be much heavier, right? But we're talking about biologically if you need to support more weight, what do you do? What does your body do? It expands. So look at elephants, right? Elephants are massive because they weigh a shitload. So I mean, for a human to start tacking on that much weight per muscle, per bone, per organ, right? What's the logical solution? Expand.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like me after an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Heavier frames to support the extra weight. Steve, this was a question for you. It says, how many chromosomes in humans compared to how many in plants?
Well, there's not a great pattern to it. Humans have 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. Some plants have hundreds of chromosomes. There really isn't a straight comparison. It's kind of like, comparing the watermelon with the tardigrade. Infinite variety and infinite diversity, infinite combinations.
Infinite combinations.
As we were talking, I was kind of scrolling through that article that I was reading, and I ran across a term called paleoploidy. And it says that ancient genome duplications probably occurred in the evolutionary history of all life. And it states that nearly every organism experienced, all eukaryotic organisms, so organisms that have a nucleus like humans, animals, plants, probably experienced a polyploidal event at some point in their evolutionary history. But those extra sets of DNA may have turned into what they refer to as junk DNA. Well, we know that humans have a lot of junk DNA. Who's to say that these other genes weren't other chromosome sets that got absorbed at some point? I mean, anything is possible. If we can think of it, biology has thought of it, or a creator, or whatever it is that you subscribe to. I joke that I'm not that creative, and we're thinking of these things. So it does. Well, it certainly would be an interesting prospect to be able to be a fly on the wall while this was all occurring. And I would love to get a hold of one of those bodies that, the Vatican or the Smithsonian disappeared on us to kind of get a look at the DNA, because we have the technology now. The lab that I had access to in, undergraduate college could do a genotype on an organism. We could do a full genome analysis on it, and that was a simple lab.
What about gene expression?
Oh, well, like the junk DNA situation. Yeah. Well, very well. I mean, they believe that a very large percentage of our DNA is junk, and that's why the writers like Jonathan Maybury with his vampire series, his V Wars, lots of freaky things can happen if you amplify and express these silent genes. What do they hold? Could we be superhuman? Could we be something altogether different? Could we be a 36-foot tall giant that the Carthaginians find? I don't know. It's a lot of what ifs. We haven't given that much. We, the human race, have not given a whole lot of effort into analyzing this junk DNA because it's not expressed in us. The Human Genome Project didn't give a rat's hairy ass about the junk DNA because those genes aren't expressed. They're not going to make your eyes blue. They're not going to make your hair brown. They're not going to make you bald. They're just there, and we don't know why they're there. And, I think as we're getting to understand genetics further, we may understand more. But then you got to look at the other side of that. Okay, what are you going to do with this knowledge? If there's not a market for it, then why are you going to do it? Well, if you do have a market, okay, then you're talking about eugenics, and that's a whole other set of problems. I don't know. I'd like to learn more about it. I really would.
I'm going to say something. Oh, yeah. Eli Harrison said giant bones were also found in Native American burial mounds across the nation. When I was doing research for the book, I just went into edits. Dark Frontiers. I was doing some research on the Osage, and in about 1865, the average height of an Osage warrior was between 6.5 and 7 feet tall. That's a big fella for 1865.
Yeah, that's big for a Native American anyway, because
big for anybody back then. But that was the average.
Hey, Chairman Mao Zedong posed a question for me. She was asking if I was a professor or I still work in the medical field. I do work in the medical field. I'm a practicing RN in a basically a large urgent care, like essentially a small ER. I did teach at the nursing school for about 5 years, but it's been a little bit. But before I was a nurse, my degree was in microbiology, so I love this whole nerdy end of things. Finally, DA and company are talking something that I understand. Usually, I'm just sitting here quietly drinking, going, yeah.
Monduck says, I want to say that the Sioux were large as well. Well, funny you should say that. The Osage were of the Sioux. They were a Siouan tribe. Yeah, Werewolf 5674 says NBA sized. Yeah, the Osage were of the Sioux. They were one of the tribes of the Sioux, and they were massive. I mean, 6.5, 7 feet tall. That's a big fella. Probably a little tough finding a horse for a guy that size. There was something else I was going to say. Kind of poke things back toward giants. We kind of got off on a tangent there.
I wonder if they started breeding those giant war horses during this giant era. Because it seems to me you'd want something like a Belgian or a Clydesdale to put a big son of a bitch like that on. Whereas you or I would ride
horse.
Yeah, you put you or me on a quarter horse, but you're going to need something like a Clydesdale if you're 8 feet tall.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Look at that's another great example. Look at the bone structure and the body structure of, say, a quarter horse versus a Clydesdale. They're both horses,
right?
But a Clydesdale is just massively constructed.
Oh yeah, they're pretty ridiculous.
Well, you can make that with dogs too. I mean, look at a Chihuahua versus a Great Dane.
Yeah, it's shocking they're even the same animal.
Well, yeah, they're literally the same species. You take those Russian
Caucasian Ovcharkas.
Yeah, the Ovcharkas. Compare an Ovcharka to a teacup Chihuahua. They are the same species. They
don't look at all the same, but they're the same species.
Well,
fundamentally,
but you compare Vern Troyer to Robert Wadlow, they're the same species too.
So, Steve, out of curiosity, do you think it could be a sort of like selective breeding?
Oh, for the giants?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my mind's kind of wrapping around the Carthaginians. Of course they found them, but that area of the world where the Carthaginians, lived was fought over for hundreds, thousands of years. There would certainly be an advantage to it. If the average, let's say the average human that size is 5 feet tall, and you want to take out the other guys, you want bigger soldiers. When you pick a fight in a bar, you make sure your buddy's the big guy. I would say it certainly would be possible. And the heights of humans has changed drastically, over short periods of time. I mean, look at the height of the NBA players, how tall they've gotten in recent history compared to like 1980s.
Yeah. A 7-footer in the 80s was unheard of.
Yeah. And I've got 80s, friends who are 6'9". I never saw that, that long ago.
In the 80s, somebody that was 6'7", 6'8" will be playing a power forward. Now, you got 6'7", 6'8" people playing point guard and shooting guard.
Yeah. Mike from Abnormal Investigations has a good point. He said, that's what made me think that Bigfoot and Dogman could be the same thing, like the Great Dane and the Poodle, same thing, different sizes. That's an interesting theory. And you know, again, folks, all we got is theory at this point. And Mike, I think that's an interesting theory we could pursue at some point. Maybe we could do something together. I would play the other side of that because I don't really think they're the same thing. I think they're very different. But I see your argument. I understand the point on that. That would be a good compare and contrast show, I think.
Well, you touched on something very important very early in the show when you're talking about science and the definition of science. There are very few actual facts in science. Most of what we're dealing with here are theories that are just repeatable, experiments that are repeatable,
Well, one of the key tenets to science is just observation.
Yep,
it's just watching.
What we refer to as the laws of physics. Going back to the show we just did on UFOs, as we get more and more contact with whatever that is, be it alien, be it time traveler, or whatever it is, as we're exposed to more and more of that technology, our knowledge of physics is going to change. Those laws of physics that we refer to as the hard and fast laws of physics might merely be suggestions of physics. More like guidelines, really.
Guidelines. Well, and of course, everything that we are basing our knowledge on too is based on, 4 dimensions of space-time. We keep on talking about some of these organisms could shift dimensions. Some of the woo, I think, is what some of you guys call it. There are certain equations in physics that only work in 11 dimensions. Does that mean there are? Does it mean does that mean our equations are completely fundamentally wrong where they don't work? Maybe there is things like hyperspace, subspace. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out someday.
I guarantee there's mysteries of the universe we have not solved. Humanity is yet to crack. Especially when we start looking at extraplanetary or extra galaxy travel. We haven't cracked that code yet, and at the point where we do, I think it's going to fundamentally change how we look at physics.
Well, and that's the thing is like in order to travel between galaxy and solar systems and whatnot, we have to advance on what is known as the Kardashev scale. Right now, humans are at, I think, like a 0.81 on the Kardashev scale. A 1 on the Kardashev scale means you have colonized another planet and you have mastered nuclear fusion. We've done neither of those things.
Yep.
We're not anywhere close either.
A level 1 civilization can take advantage of 100% of the energy of a planet. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet.
We are not anywhere close.
To get to class 2, we have to somehow manage to understand and utilize 100% of the energy of a star. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about somebody who could build like a Dyson sphere or something like this. Mm-hmm. And that would put you on hand with something like the Federation in Star Trek. You start getting into a class 3 civilization, which would be required for intergalactic travel. You'd have to manage the entire energy output of a galaxy. That's like, the Empire in Star Wars isn't even there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they travel from one end of the galaxy to the other in a couple of hours.
Wanted to point out, Chairman Meow said we just achieved fusion. Technically, only off of technicality. There was a project in which, utilizing a series of mirrors, and I don't know all the details that go into it, but basically utilizing light, they were capable of getting out more energy than they put in. They have not been able to recreate that result.
No, and the only way
I think it's a matter of time, though.
Yeah, the only way we can reliably do fusion now is in a thermonuclear weapon.
Right.
And that's kind of more the set it off and run than use a viable energy source.
Well, I mean, you look at the basis for any sort of gathering of energy. The first way that you are going to figure out how to start creating energy is by creating a weapon first. Look at the potentiality of creating like a Penrose sphere, right? It's like a Dyson sphere that you put around a black hole, right? What's the first thing you're gonna do besides figure out how to harness the energy from the black hole? You're gonna figure out how to weaponize that black hole. You're gonna turn that sucker into a bomb.
Yeah, who can I put in this black hole?
Right.
Yeah, you're going to turn that sucker into a bomb.
Yeah, we do. We do have ever developed the technology of getting close, being able to closely observe a black hole. There are going to be guys getting drunk and throwing fireworks into it to see what happens.
Just, I think the scientific term for something being stretched out by a black hole is spaghettified. I think that is the actual scientific term. Because I took AP astronomy my junior year of high school. And I remember we were talking about that, and they're like, yeah, so there isn't exactly a term for it, but yeah, this is what everyone says.
William Nighthawk says, the Earth and laws of survival. Rule number 1, don't die. Rule 2, run faster than the ones with you. Rule 3, if you can't run, dress in all brown and lay on the ground because even giants don't like stepping in shit.
Good point.
Pretty good rules.
And this is from the oral tradition of Native peoples.
There we go. The wit and wisdom of William Nighthawk.
The wisdom, William Knight. Hey, some call him a survivor, some call him a philosopher. We call him friend.
That's right. Hey guys, this is a good time to take a quick breather. I know I need to hit the bathroom. Why don't we take a minute, talk about our affiliate
Sponsors.
programs. Talk about our sponsors, and one by one we can filter out and stretch our legs and hit the bathroom. I'm not at a full code emergency yet, but I'm pretty close. So, Robbie, you want to do Scallywag first, and me do Dark Angel, or? Okay, well then I'm going to disappear for just a moment while I step across the hall.
Hi, folks. Those of you that have been with us before, you know how we feel about our military veteran-owned companies. Scallywag Tactical is one of those. Make some of the best blades you'll ever put in your hand. This one here is the Dew Claw. Very good EDC knife. I've got it set up in a scout carry where I can carry it on the back of my belt. They make all kinds of folders, fixed blades, kitchen knives. Noah can attest to how good the kitchen knives that they make are.
Oh yeah.
Very just about there's a few that are brought into the house or brought in house, but most all their knives are handmade, full tang construction, very thick, robust. You just can't say enough good about these knives. And they've got a very good discount code with us. If you use code DA Roberts 10 at checkout, that gives you 10%. But they also have what's called the blemish blades. And most of the time, that's just the box. Something's happened with the box and they can't sell it as new. So that actually stacks up with that. So you can actually get some pretty good savings on these blades. And I used to carry a Kershaw, which is pretty high dollar knife. If any of you know anything about knives, Kershaws are very proud of their stuff. My Kershaw now sits on my nightstand, and my Orca is my everyday carry that I put on my uniform every day that I carry with me. I'm a knife freak. I've always been one. I've got probably more knives than most people have, pairs of socks. And these Scallywag Tactical blades are some of the best knives that I've ever had. And I even make my own knives. So they're great. I mean, we can't say enough good about them. DA's got probably one of every folder they've got. And
most of them.
Just about. They probably made a few new ones that you don't have, but you've got most of the other ones.
I've got a few of the folders too, and I really like them.
Yeah, they're great. Go check them out. Like I said, use code DA Roberts 10 at checkout. Get yourself a 10% discount on what you get. You won't be sorry. Really good knives.
Yeah, and follow the link that's in the chat and here on the screen. And don't forget to use discount code DA Roberts 10 at checkout. That even works on the blemish blades, which are the discounted blades. I've never had a problem from a blemish blade. Every blemish blade I've got The only blemish was the box was damaged, so they couldn't sell it as new. Outstanding knives. I can't say enough good about them. Whew. Anybody else need to step away for a minute? Because I know I definitely needed to.
No, I've not yet begun to defile myself. So
I'm normally on for several hours.
Okay, well, I'm going to let Doc himself tell us about Dark Angel Medical.
Hey, everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
Dark Angel kits are the best in the business. And if you ever use your kit to save somebody's life, if they have the kit for life guarantee, they'll resupply the kit for free for life. Go to this link here or darkangelmedical.com. Use the discount code CRYPTID25 for 25% off your entire order. And you know, there's one other thing that I should be playing more often, but I don't. I keep forgetting to do it, but we already have a commercial for it, so I'm gonna play one more thing.
From the mind of author D.A. Roberts. Cryptids. Lakeview Man. Apex Predator. Codename Wild Hunt. Zombies, the Ragnarok Rising Saga. Science fiction and fantasy, Lost Legion. Find them all at daroberts.net or amazon.com.
yeah, so that's a testament to how into the subject matter that you are, where you forget to play your own damn commercial.
Yeah, I almost never play that thing, and I really should be playing it like every show. That commercial needs to be updated. It's missing like the Man's Marauders series. It's missing, yeah, that's like 4 or 5 books behind. But Miss Naoma made that commercial for me and did a really wonderful job.
Well, given the fact you start a new series every month, the production cost of keeping your commercial up to date would be a little bit cumbersome.
Yep, the new series, the first book of the new series is done. It's in edits right now. For those of you who are familiar with me speaking about it, the series is called Dark Frontiers. It's a cryptid series about people hunting cryptids, much like a lot of my other series. Well, this one's set in 1865, just at the end of the Civil War, and I think you guys are really going to like it. I'm really enjoying writing this series. It's a lot of fun. So the book's in edits now. So look for that being released soon. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick cover reveal on that one. How many folks out there would like to see the cover for this? Because I've already released it on the page with all my Patreons and the alphas have all seen the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I need to
pick me. I want to see it.
You haven't seen it, Steve?
Oh, I've seen it. I want to see it again, though.
Okay, well let me find.
I want to see it on national media, my friend.
There we go.
Badass cover.
Well, give me just a second because for some reason it's not in the file I thought it was in.
You know, I find it rather somewhat ironic that we start having all these technical difficulties at the start of our shows about the time we started talking about the UFO conspiracy.
Guys, you cover for me while I find that picture? I can't find it. It's not showing up in any of my files.
All right, who wants to play charades?
So if I remember correctly, this series, like you said, it takes place right at the close of the Civil War. It's about like one of the, essentially the earliest form of the Wild Hunt, right? The groups The people that
Kind
did
of the
Wild Hunt
precursor.
stuff. The precursor, yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Wild, and then in parentheses, West Hunt.
Was that?
It wasn't a
Yeah.
military unit at first.
Well, I see this being a very interesting series because
Surprise
part of the
to pull a
fun of the
military.
Wild Hunt is the fact that, granted, they're fighting cryptids, but then you got dudes with the best weapons that the government money can buy fighting cryptids with some difficulty. I think it's interesting to think about how that dynamic would change if the cryptids and the other things that go bump in the night have their existing level of tech and development, and we're working with cap-lock weapons.
Hey man, don't sleep on my black powder revolver, all right?
They'll do some damage.
I am not fighting fault with it at all. Like we joke around all the time about how current weapons platforms and everything versus something like an M1 versus something like a good flintlock weapon versus if, depending on the time period, depending on the application, there's a reason that a lot of gun enthusiasts still carry a 110-year-old gun design around on their hip because it works.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got the image ready if everybody's ready to see it. For the first time publicly revealed. It's only been shown to a close-knit group of people.
And we were sworn to secrecy.
They were sworn to secrecy.
I didn't know I was sworn to secrecy. I just didn't say anything.
Well, this is the first time it's been revealed publicly. This is the cover for Dark Frontier First Hunt.
That is badass.
I like it.
See, I had not seen the cover. I only saw, I guess, the logo, which I am demanding some kind of patch up, to be honest with you. But...
Oh yeah, that logo where it says Dark Frontiers with the pistols. I'm going to get that made into patches.
That's badass. What's on the playing card?
A death's head on the Ace of Spades.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like a skull and crossbones.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm viewing the podcast on a 13-inch MacBook, so I don't quite have the high resolution. My wife is playing on the 27-inch gaming machine, and so I've got old ass eyes. But besides,
Christy Crawford wants to know when the book will be ready to purchase. It's in edits right now. Depending on how long the edits take me, it's probably going to be at least 3 or 4 days in edits. And then I've got to do layout, formatting, and get the cover finalized because the image has to be adjusted per page count, and that's how book spines are. The width of the spine determines the overall image. So I'll have to send final page count once everything's done and set up. I'll have to send that all over to Adam, and he'll get me final cover. And after that, well, we had some trouble with Amazon when I uploaded the last book. It took them a week to get it released once I had it uploaded, but they're now saying they've got the process fixed and it should only take 72 hours. So I will announce when the book is uploaded to Amazon, and I will also announce whenever I actually get confirmation that the book has gone live. So I should have print edition and Kindle edition within probably a few hours of each other. But I will announce as soon as it's all available and uploaded to Amazon. It'll give you a rough time when it's going to go live. But it just depends on how long it takes me to get the thing edited, really. But I want to do a really good job, so I'm going to kind of take my time on it.
Well, you were nicer than I was thinking about the Amazon thing. I'm like, well, sometime between 24 hours and a hair past never, it'll get released, from the publisher.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you. Trust Jesus gave us a $2 super chat and said they're doing a $1 matchup up to $200 total. That is awesome. Thank you.
So I can't pull up the questions. Dr. 45120 Sharp Rothstein. I don't know if you guys can pull that up. Those of you who have access. They're asking what series is the cover. This is
That's a brand new series.
Yeah, and what was the name of it again, DA?
The series is called Dark Frontiers. This will be the first book of the series.
There you go. And sorry, I'm like trying to watch the chat, but I have limited access, and I'm okay with that.
What was that, Noah?
I said, I don't know where all these yawns are coming from, but holy hell, I'm sorry. My eyes are bloodshot all of a sudden too.
You're bored from my microbiological
prattling over there?
diatribe.
No, I think my blood sugar's crashing. I may have to run in the other room for a minute.
Yeah, take that seriously.
Two Thinking says, on the DA-verse timeline, where will this series sit? Well, it's set in 1865, so it will be set well before any of the other books.
So it's before everything.
Right. Robin Blake, thank you so much for the super chat. That is awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, I've got a super chat from Qbot. Thank you so much. That is awesome.
Well, I guess I need to amend that statement. It's not necessarily before everything, but before quite a bit.
Yeah, but it's right at this point, it would probably be on. It would appear on the timeline up above everything else of all the other books. But that may change at some point in the future. Well, I've also got the next. Well, you know, I showed this to the alphas. I showed this to the. I showed this not only to the alphas, I showed it to my Patreon, and I always try to reveal stuff like this on the Patreon and for the alphas first, because the alphas are the ones that are in the trenches there, digging stuff out for me. Let me show you guys something. Where's it at? Here we go. In the right spot. Let me find it. I'm going to have to share screen on this one.
Sure.
It's not something I can put up. Let me share the screen.
Well, and while he's digging things up here, I want to give a thank out to all of our moderators who kind of keep the chat flowing. I don't know how y'all do it, guys. We appreciate you.
They are awesome. I don't know how well y'all can read this, but this is the current projects I've got listed. And waiting to write. Let me try to zoom that in so you guys can read it a little bit better. But these are the books I've already got planned for the, and they're not in order. These are just books I've got plans for the next few years. And there's a new series right there at the bottom. The triplets from the Codename Wild Hunt series, the Giovanni triplets, are going to get their own series. It's going to be called Brotherhood of the Vigilant.
All right, you just answered my question. I'm like, okay, the Brotherhood of the Vigilant, what is that series?
And I've got a dozen. I've got a plan so far for a dozen of the Dark Frontiers novels.
Okay, what about the Project Olympus and Heroes of Valgard? Are those new series as well?
Project Olympus is a new series. I forgot I hadn't mentioned that one before. Project Olympus is going to be kind of like Codename Wild Hunt, but it's going to be dealing with non-terrestrial threats. And we'll be starting that series soon. I've already got most of the notes set out for that. And the Heroes of Valgard is a continuation of my fantasy series. Heroes of Valgard to be the second trilogy. The first one is higher up.
Like the Man's Marauders series?
Right. Man's Marauders will continue as well. Like here at the top, you'll see the Blood and Redemption trilogy. That's the first three of my fantasy series, first trilogy. The next trilogy will be Heroes of Valgard. Here's the Man's Marauders books I've got planned. Under the Eagle, Pirates Holiday, and Terminal Velocity are the ones I've got planned so far. And this list is not all inclusive. There are other stuff that is going to get added to this. But this is projects that are going to keep me busy for the next several years. So
your Olympus series there, would that have anything to do with the new zip code for a certain Mr. Grey Eagle?
No, it'll be Grey Eagle will be coming back to the Wild Hunt and the Apex Predator books, but it's not going to be until probably the second book of the Blood and Redemption trilogy.
Okay, so the universe that he is in.
That's the fantasy series, the Heroes of Valgard and Blood and Redemption trilogies.
Gotcha.
That's where he's at right now.
Okay.
That's funny. Shy sizes. Damn it, DA. All those books give my wallet a chance to recover.
Well, it's like the law of conservation of matter and energy. The money that you lose goes into his pocket, and so
The money cannot be destroyed.
the money is
It can
not
only be
destroyed or
repurposed.
created.
Cannot be created or destroyed.
It mainly
It's
changes form.
It's like energy.
It goes from our paychecks to a big ass report from Amazon.
And then it goes from his wallet to food or this or that, and that food goes into energy, and that energy goes into books, and then the books
and that
go
energy
into you.
powers this universe.
Yeah.
That energy
Remember-
pays for the podcast.
God, these books are fueled on caffeine. So just remember
Caffeine and alcohol.
coffee and alcohol.
Coffee, alcohol, and those Zoa energy drinks.
So
At
you
least
mentioned
they
this
ain't fueled on the same thing that Stephen King's books were fueled on.
Yeah, you mentioned
Well, those
this
were his
in
movies.
in the green room earlier, Da.
Rob, you
Before we
just
went
come in.
live, you were talking about wanting to reveal a couple of recipes, weren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
So,
You want to give the history of the South Boston?
So, in the early days of the Wild Hunt series, some of these conversations, for those of you who don't know, Steve's Pub and Grub doesn't exist. If you drive to the south gate of Fort Leonard Wood, first of all, you probably get arrested. But if you don't get
No,
arrested,
they'll just tell you to turn around and go away.
if you don't get arrested, you're not going to find anything there. There is no bar. Steve's Pub and Grub is kind of a nicety for a way of describing my kitchen. In the early days of the story, of course, Dee and I have been longtime friends. We'd sit down at my kitchen table and talk his books, and he'd bounce ideas off of me, and I would bounce them back because we're both huge nerds. And most of these conversations were fueled by a respectable quantity of alcohol. And we used to make jokes that at Steve's Pub, every drink's a double. And he got a big kick out of that. And when we were actually fleshing out the character of Gideon, I think, or you were fleshing out, I was contributing little nitpicks. We started making drinks. Well, Dee and I both are big fans of Irish whiskey, and so are most of the characters in his books. Those of you who've read the Ragnarok series, know the Bushmills is very near and dear to the hearts of certain characters in there. And I, being kind of a throwback myself, love a Manhattan. And so I don't think Dee ever had a Manhattan. I made one while he was there working the books. So he goes, these aren't bad. And he goes, you know what? These would be really good with Bushmills. And so we're like, huh. And Manhattans are normally with rye whiskey or bourbon, depending on what bar you go to. And so we started making it with these.
I'm just not a rye guy. I'm not a big fan of rye.
Rye is kind of
I
sweet.
am.
If you're not used to it, if you like Irish whiskey, you're probably not a big rye fan. Well, anyway, we started making these Manhattans with Irish whiskey. And the joke was
Bushmills
made.
Black specifically.
Bushmills Black. The joke was made after a couple of drinks that you can't call it a Manhattan if it's made with Irish whiskey. I'm like, what the hell are we going to call it? And DA goes, well, we're going to call it a South Boston. Because, of course, South Boston has a huge Irish population. And we had kind of a laugh about that. And like, that's going to be in a book somewhere. That's going to pop up in a book. And so, the Bushmills Black Manhattan is the South Boston. And it may surface at some point at Steve's Pub and Grub. We'll see.
It's going to make an appearance.
The Shepherd's Pies made it.
Shepherd's Pies.
But yeah, one of these days, maybe we need to make the recipe available to the patrons and see what they think. And then if they like it, upload it to the rest.
May have to. That sounds like a lot of fun. I know we kind of digressed from the talk of giants, but I do sometimes fail to talk about the books, which is really the whole reason I even got started in all this. The podcast really started out as us to talk about weird stuff and to talk about my books, to try to bring my books into a bigger audience. And sometimes I completely forget that. We get off topic, or we get so focused on talking about cryptids, I completely forget about the books. But hopefully, if you guys like cryptids or you like books with a lot of action, very fast-paced stories, I hope you check them out. You can find everything on my books at daroberts.net. And all of the books are available on Amazon and Kindle and in print. And we've been working. There's a Steve's Pub and Grub in South Africa. Oh, that would be awesome. Do they sell T-shirts? We have Steve's Pub and Grub T-shirts in the DA store.
That's
That's
amazing.
that's freaking awesome. There's a Steve's Pub and Grub.
Well, I have a shot glass that I think my sister got for me. I collect shot glasses. I like to travel, and shot glasses are a nice souvenir you can buy for under $10, and it'll fit in your suitcase. And so I have a ton of them from everywhere I've been. And my sister at one point gave me a shot glass that had this brass plaque stuck to it, and it said Steve's Pub. And so we were joking around. I think actually when we were measuring out the first South Boston, we were using that as a measure. And I'm like, these are the drinks at Steve's Pub. But that's awesome.
Man, you're talking about having a collection of shot glasses. The only shot glass I have that isn't even technically mine is this little plastic Rebel Yell one, and it's just the one I've been using for like 2 years.
I have dozens of them. It's just been an easy thing. Shot glasses are never questioned when you go through customs, and they're pretty durable. I've had the blessing of being able to travel quite a bit, and I lived in the Philippines for a while. I brought back a few shot glasses from there. It's a neat thing. It's a small, neat little thing, and it saves space.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna get in any trouble with customs for shot glass smuggling. I don't know if there's a charge for that.
No, I have, thanks to some of DA's books, my tastes have turned to Scotch over the last several years.
Oh,
and I scored a very nice, expensive bottle of Scotch on the last trip that I took for a very reasonable price. And I'm used to going through duty-free stores and used to traveling and used to going through customs and everything. And somehow or another, the whole customs process for the last trip that I took was problematic at best. Like it wasn't very well organized. And I may have allegedly smuggled a fifth of Scotch into the United States. Accidentally. It was accidentally. Yeah, totally by accident, seriously. And we're like, okay, well, can't do anything about it now. And, if I disappear tomorrow, you know what happened.
I know with at least going across state lines, if you can prove that, or not if you can prove, but if you can articulate that it's for personal consumption, then you're not considered trafficking alcohol. I don't think that applies internationally, but maybe that's how you got away with it. Maybe they're like, yeah, this is for personal use. Why not?
Well, and
it's not wood grain alcohol.
No one's going to risk life, limb, and freedom over a fifth of Scotch.
This is my only shot glass. I don't know if you can see the logo there. And then it's alasquatch.com. Back when we had Larry Beans Baxter as a guest on the show, I went to his website and I bought one of his books and bought this shot glass because I thought it was pretty neat.
Yeah, if you want to have a fun experience in suggestive marketing, buy DA's books off of Amazon, and then see what they suggest that you may also like. When I bought, so my wife bought me the first book. All my books are on Kindle because I have a big shelf behind me that is full. I have another shelf over here that is full, and I'm out of room in the office that I share with my wife. So I've been banned from buying any more actual books. So I use a Kindle. Well, when the first book in the Codename Wild Hunt series came out, it was around my birthday, and my wife was like, you need to have a physical copy of this book. You played a small part in its inception. You're mentioned in it. This is important. And so she bought me a copy of Odin's Call over the first printing, and I had DA and his wife over. We barbecued, and I made him autograph it for me. And so when from buying that online, this little thing came up and it said, "Hey, if you were interested in Codename Wild Hunt Odin's Call, you may like this." Da da da, and it suggested a flask, and I found
Can't
it
go
amusing.
wrong with a flask.
I found it amusing, and so I'm like, I'm going to buy the damn flask. So I bought it. What was the last one, Dave? There was another similar product like that. It prompted, if you like this, you should buy this. Oh, the Whoopee.
Yeah.
The last Wild Hunt book, they mentioned the Whoopee, the military poncho liner blanket. And it's like, if you bought this, you may want this Whoopee. I'm like, I want a Whoopee.
Which I find hilarious that it would suggest that based on, because it's mentioned in the book.
Yeah, it's mentioned in the book a couple of times. So, I bought the Whoopee. So,
Speaking of Whoopies, there's a company making hoodies of them now.
There's a company making Whoopee hoodies?
Yeah, Whoopee hoodies.
Yep.
That's just wild.
I got suggested them on Amazon the other day, and I was like...
Well, my wife was harassing me because I was telling her, I texted her at work, I'm like, the dog stole my Whoopee. And she goes, which dog? I said, Kenai. She goes, he weighs 10 pounds. I'm like, he took my Whoopee. And she goes, listen to yourself for a moment. You're complaining because the dog stole your Whoopee. I'm like, leave me alone. Jimmy G says, speaking of cigars, Cubans are legal here. May have to bring a box or two on my visit later this year. I would gladly sign up for that visit with you, Jimmy G. I would visit any fan anyway, but I lived in the Philippines for about 4 months several years ago, 15 years ago now. And, of course, Cuban cigars are legal in the Philippines. And I was already kind of a, cigar, I don't want to say an aficionado, but I was a cigar consumer. And I learned that the Cuban cigars are worth everything that they say about them. And in fact, I had the pleasure of hanging out at the Hard Rock Cafe in Makati, smoking Cuban cigars and hanging out with Arnel Pineda, who was the lead singer of a band called The Zoo. He's now singing for Journey. So
I knew I knew that name.
Yeah. So Neil Schoen found a video on YouTube of The Zoo performing Journey covers at the Hard Rock Makati. And he found it. It's like, hey, this guy can sing. And he reached out to him and said, hey, we're in the market of looking for a new lead singer. Would you fly out to, I think it was Los Angeles, and come sing for us? And he got stopped at immigration. And he's like, I'm here to audition for Journey. And the guy's like, yeah, bullshit, whatever. And he started singing Journey a cappella. The guy's like, okay, you're legit. He let him through.
That's funny.
Since 2007, he has been the new Steve Perry. And and it was so funny because in the Philippines, I was obviously American, and he would sit down between sets and hang out with me and my friends from the business I worked for. And I was like, it's really odd when the band seeks you out as a celebrity to hang out with because of who you are, or what country you're from, or whatever. But funny stuff. Yeah, K-Talk, I agree with you completely. There is only one Steve Perry, but Arnel does a damn good job.
I think the prerequisite was that he was just a city boy born and raised in South Detroit.
Funny. It's funny you say that. He was actually a tailor. He was a Philippine tailor. And for giggles and grins, he fronted a band called The Zoo. And they would do covers of Journey, Bon Jovi, a few other bands. They were actually a really good band. They would perform every Friday night at the Hard Rock. And, I had nothing else to do with myself but smoke Cuban cigars and drink overpriced alcohol at the Hard Rock. And so over the 4 months I lived there, we got to be pretty good friends with him and his band, and the rest is history. Yeah. As long as he doesn't stop believing. Oh, Lord. I'm realizing our clientele here.
Keeping his eye on the wheel in this guy.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps on turning, so I mean...
Oh my God. Can't work with you people.
The bad puns apply. Um, I guess we can lasso the topic and try to drag it back in for a little bit. We are coming up close to the end of the second hour. Yeah, we talked quite a bit about giants, and somebody mentioned the Smithsonian. There have been numerous documented cases of giant skeletons unearthed here in the U.S. that were taken by the Smithsonian to be studied, and were never heard from again. And I firmly believe the Smithsonian is just a front for gathering certain information that they don't want people having. And God knows what they've got between them and the archives beneath the Vatican. It's been postulated that part of the Library of Alexandria may be in the Vatican.
I mean, there's speculation that there's so many religious texts from over the years, Norse religious texts, even like Druidic texts from the Celtics that were recovered when St. Patrick went through, and they're underneath the Vatican. Nobody can access them because they're in the Forbidden Library.
Yeah, the Vatican Secret Archives, you have a better chance of walking into Fort Knox than walking out with a brick. I think Noah, you were the first one on, at least on the air that posed. What are you doing, Robbie?
I had to.
Sorry, I had something in my eye.
Oh,
I just saw it, Robbie.
God, Robbie.
At least I typed it and didn't say it, but it still had the same effect.
Oh, I can't work with you guys. But no, I think Noah was the first on the air to make the allegation about it really wasn't the Smithsonian. And as much as
we should clarify, I didn't point the finger at anybody.
No. As much as I don't like to put the tinfoil hat on, I think that you've made a justifiable point.
That it may not have been the Smithsonian at all. It may have been somebody
and I'm not
posing as the
at
Smithsonian.
Anybody else. Right. I think there is reasonable evidence that it was not the Smithsonian, but some entity posing as a Smithsonian. I'm not saying it's the Vatican. I'm not saying it's the Illuminati. I'm not saying it's anybody, lizard people, whatever you want to insert here. I'm just saying I don't think it was the Smithsonian.
Yeah, it's the reptilians, and then they're opening their eyes sideways so they can steal all the giant skeletons.
Lizard people.
Werewolf said, "Bye, Noah."
Where am I going?
You can blow the lid off of it.
just like look at the window, like, huh? When did the neighbors get that new unmarked van?
My handlers have said it never happened. You know, this Noah guy, he ain't just a cook. He's pretty smart. He's got some good ideas.
No, government, I don't. I'm actually an idiot. I promise. I'm dumb as soup, dog.
We went back and watched a bunch of his episodes and he keeps talking about cooking people. I don't know. There's just something about this kid.
Listen, I don't keep talking about cooking people. It gets brought up and then everyone points the finger at me and is like, hey, that guy can cook people.
On a completely unrelated note, his highest rated stream referred to seasoning of long pork.
Hey, man, listen. All I'm saying is if it cooks the same as pork and tastes the same as pork, all I put on my pork is Cavenders and chives.
No wonder Bigfoot and Dogman come after us. We're delicious.
Werewolf 9674. He could cook long pig. He beat me to it.
Oh, man. And
Toshi's not wrong.
If there are giants out there and they're like humans, they still cook too.
I would say if they argue that bison is a slightly leaner, gamier
joking
version
aside,
of beef, I would suppose the giants are probably slightly.
Think about all these. Think about all the nursery rhymes and all the little. Jack and the Beanstalk. What did giants eat?
People.
People.
Maybe those old nursery rhymes were a cautionary tale,
Well,
much like Grimm's fairy tales
Yeah.
were originally.
yeah, those weren't.
They
Those were
certainly weren't
very
children's
dark.
stories.
Yeah, they were very dark and very evil.
Mm-hmm.
Billy, half past time to get the hell up out of here.
Oh, I mean, like if they are eating people, I mean, maybe I can show them a few recipes and save myself.
Go to work for them.
Hey guys, listen. I know I look pretty delicious. All right, got some extra fat on me. I'll last you at least the winter. All right, listen. Or I introduce you to my friend Cavender's seasoning.
Right. I was about to say, yeah, I look pretty tasty, but this is my friend Steve, and I have Cavender's.
Sweet baby Ray's.
Y'all know how to make fire, right? Y'all got butter? Shit, all right. About to make this dude taste good.
Introduce the giants to Tony Sachrays.
Yeah. My friends are marinated. They like alcohol.
Have you ever heard of
would that be
Zatarain?
Would that be marinated or would that be almost brined?
Pickled. Yeah, pickled.
Pickled people. One-eyed, one-horned, flying purple or pickled people eater.
Pickled people eater.
Imagine the size of the jar. The size of the jar you'd have to pickle a person in.
Yeah, they set it to W for Wumbo.
It'd be like a 55-gallon drum the mafia's used them for years.
No, we're not gonna give you cement shoes. We're just gonna pickle you for a while.
Yeah. Pop the lid up and like Proper 12.
Hey, and you wonder where Jimmy Hoffa went? He's
They pickled him.
He's been being served in bars around Philly for the last 20 years.
He's a kosher deal somewhere. Or
He's just been a Jack Daniels barrel for God only knows how long.
You're talking about kosher deals. So years ago, you're living with my parents. We lived in a house with a basement and a sump pump, and it was like a kind of a humid basement. And my mother would make something, bread and butter pickle, and she would make these pickles in 5-gallon buckets. And I remember there was the most unique smell in that basement when these things were seasoning or whatever, bread, butter, and human. Oh my God, they beat me to it. But I just remember all these things smell so good, but the base is probably flammable. But it was absolutely amazing. And the things you learn. Bread and buttered human. Oh, Lord.
Thank you, Chaz.
Bob Foot said, did I miss the topic? We were on topic for about the first hour and 20 minutes. Then we got sidetracked.
Hey, we made it about an hour and 35. Give us some credit.
Ish.
Hey, man, listen. Ish. I feel like we're still sort of on topic with talking about the potentiality of giants pickling people, all right?
Well,
we gotta explore their dietary, their nutritional system, right? Well, we gotta understand how they eat.
trying to fish this back toward at least roughly on the topic. I think we did hit on some interesting points. I mean, when Steve started talking about multiple sets of DNA, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, like I said, it just hit me when I didn't realize. Again, I go into these cold because I want to be the reaction. My role in our podcast is I am the reaction and or the agnostic believer in the cryptid. Because I mentioned before, I've never been lucky or unfortunate enough to have a cryptid sighting. I've never seen a dogman. I've never seen a Bigfoot. I am open to the prospect, but I've just never had that personal experience like a lot of folks have. And so I like to go in cold. But yeah, when you showed us that video of that 36-foot tall humanoid, I always imagined giants to be Goliath from the Bible, Og from the Bible, 12 feet max. In fact, actually, when I read, some of the early apex predator stuff, they're talking about 12-foot tall dogmen. I'm like, holy shit, they get that big? It never occurred to me that a 36-foot tall humanoid was a thing. And my
that was the
mind
approach I
having a
took
little-
with my Ragnarok Rising books. That the Norse giants that appeared in the book series, the frost giants and the fire giants, they weren't 30, 40 feet tall. They were just massive, overbuilt humans.
right, the Jotuns.
The Jotuns were just in the 7-8 foot range and massively built. So the stories of giants passed down through the centuries. It's kind of like a game of telephone. Every person that tells it probably tells the story a little bit bigger. So some of these
Right.
might be apocryphal accounts. They might be massively, massively oversized. But then
No pun intended.
you look at stuff like that.
Well, it's like the
And
fish
how-
story.
Yeah,
I caught this 12-pound trout or bass, crappie, whatever. Oh, next story, it's 18 pounds. And
Yeah.
before you know it, you're hauling in, Leviathan.
right. Well, the stories, even with exaggeration, it's very difficult to explain a picture like this, or this.
Well, I'm more concerned about the picture that Robbie showed. I have a problem with the fact that a lizard foot is superimposed over a human foot.
Yeah,
I'm not a master tracker. I struggle to find out who passed gas in a closed room. But looking at that lizard foot, I'm like, okay, clearly the human foot was there, or a humanoid foot was there before the three-toed foot stepped down. That bothers me. That bothers me a lot.
that is definitely food for thinking about there. Food for thought.
Well, I mean, that goes back to, like, you can look at the Inca stones that I brought up before. How would these people, what 2,000, 3,000, maybe even 4,000 years ago, there wasn't no Google back then. How'd they know what a brontosaurus looked like? How'd they know how to draw a stegosaurus? How'd they know or what we call that? How'd they know what that looked like?
Right.
Unless they saw it.
They
like
drew
when
what they knew.
Exactly.
You look at those Egyptian cartouches, and they have a picture of Apache helicopters on them.
I mean, you don't pick up a copy of Webster's dictionary and flip through it and say, "Oh yeah, that's what." They didn't do that kind of stuff. Just
Right.
like the pictures here in the Americas and caves of the Bigfoots that are there. When those things were drawn, there was no point of reference other than right here.
Right.
And
Maybe it's possible that they read it in an earlier text, but even then, those papyrus scrolls only last so long. It's not like they had one laying around from caveman times. They had to have seen this somehow to draw it.
There's something else I want to bring to light as well. The standardization of the imperial system didn't come around until I think it was like 1100 AD. King Henry I, right? He was the one who standardized using the foot as a unit of measure because he was using the size of his foot as a unit of measure. Right. And it wasn't even until the 1700s, almost 1800s, as the metric system was adopted by the French. So we're talking ancient stories of these massive beings. Our unit of measurement is nowhere near the same as their unit of measurement, and also over time, think about playing a game of telephone with your friends, right? And you're talking about this iguana that your friend has, right? At first, the iguana is yay big, then it's this big, then it's this big, right? Think about that over thousands of years.
Right.
How big something in one of these stories is going to eventually be. At first he was 6 foot tall, then he was 6'3", and then he was, yada yada yada, up until he was 50 feet tall or some crap like that, right? But if you think about it logistically and you think about it logically, it stands to reason that these giants in these stories were just stacked tall men, like
Right.
taller than average men. So, you know, for the Vikings to say, oh, these ice folk, these Jotuns, they were massive, they were giants. They could have been in just hypothetically, for example, they could have been in Greenland and encountered some like a Yeti or something like that, right? Like, just again, purely hypothetical.
Right.
Don't know if there are Yetis in Greenland, but they could have encountered one of these, and it stood a good foot and a half taller than them, and that's a giant.
Well, I was thinking about the 12-foot giants. You know, if you want to use your argument, you know, I'm a 6 foot tall man. I wear a size 11 shoe. There you go. I wear a size 11 shoe, so my feet are a foot long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a 12-foot tall person has a little different meaning when you're wearing a size 6.
Yeah.
You know what Shaq, the basketball player, wears what, a size 15 shoe, something like that?
Yeah.
You know, now granted, he's still impressive, but you lift him up and stick him in, 16th century Europe. He's a gigantic MF.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas right now he's just a big dude.
Robbie, thanks for posting those. Those stones are, and the detail on them is what I find the most astounding.
Yeah.
Especially
They had
this
to
one right
have-
here.
They had to have been drawing that from something they'd seen.
Well, yeah. You look at the one that's, I'm pointing to it like you can see me. You look at the one that is about 2 o'clock, the big figure that you see, a complete figure. I mean, that's clearly some kind of a theropod dinosaur.
Yeah, I mean, that I see that. I think iguanodon.
Yeah,
You know,
I was
that's
going to say iguanodon, one of those
and then
things. You see,
got a
maybe a
stegosaurus.
stegosaurus there at the bottom.
Triceratops.
Yeah.
Maybe a velociraptor in the middle of the. I mean,
Yeah.
And then this other one. I mean, there's no doubt about what that is.
That's a Triceratops.
Yep. And the time these were created, you didn't get it off of Google Images.
Right.
I mean, those are at least 4,000 years old.
Yeah. That's
So-
impressive.
And that's just the first two that I picked. There's
Dozens of them.
Right.
Yeah.
just
Tip of the iceberg.
Well, while we did get off on a crazy tangent, I think we did cover the territory pretty well. Giants exist. There's no denying it. Skeletons have been found. We've got footprints that have been found cast in stone that are many times larger than a human. Buffalo Bill Cody, who had the famous Wild West show, he was once quoted as saying that when he was spending time with the Plains Indians, they showed him bones of a race that was 3 to 4 times the size of a human. And this is documented in his journals. So it wasn't like this was uncommon. It only became hidden knowledge when our government started covering it up. I watched a documentary on a guy that found large skeletons on his land in Minnesota, and the local university came in and made him not only bury them, but told him that under penalty of law he can't dig there because it's disturbing Native American relics. But he had already unearthed these giant skeletons, and they came in and buried it. It's insane that they're hiding this kind of knowledge. If they're hiding this from us, what else are they hiding from us? We know they found cryptids. We know the government has experimented on cryptids. There's too many stories of that popping up. And of the thousands of accounts we've got of seeing giant, we'll throw Bigfoot in with that, because some of these reports are 10, 11, 12 feet tall. So they could easily consider that a type of giant. Whether you subscribe to the Nephilim theory, whether you subscribe to that being a separate race that's always been here theory, whatever you subscribe to, religious texts and ancient texts from around the world talk about giants and cryptids. and many times they described the same cryptid in faraway places that had no contact. Like, for example, Australia, the Aborigines described the what they call the Yowie. They described the Yowie, and that was an independent description, which was almost identical to the same ones that would be given by Native Americans here. And this was before any European settlers documented any of this.
Well, in Australia, it split off from Pangea well before everything else did. It was Gondwana land that Australia was formed from. I mean, it's the reason that so many weird critters live in Australia is that they split off from everybody else millions of years before everybody else split up.
Yeah.
The fact that they've got the same oral history, the fact you've got these Native American tribes who never interacted with each other. The Native American tribes from, the Aleutian Islands probably didn't interact with the Iroquois in New England, but they have the same stories. There was no internet. There was no Dr. Google. There was, just oral tradition. And it does make you wonder. And you look at the religious text, how is it that, the Bible has certain details in it that you'll also find in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It has certain details that you find in creation myths in China. How?
And that's not the only creature that's described in multiple myths on multiple continents by people all across the globe. They're also talking describing creatures that we call dragons. Did they exist?
Well, and we've said that before. The word dinosaur didn't come up till the 1800s.
Right.
Yeah.
And
right.
I mean, again, it falls under the category of the worldwide long game of telephone, where the dragon could have been the size of a house cat, and then eventually it was this massive creature with wings and it breathed fire and
right, like the Velociraptor. Real Velociraptor was the size of a chicken.
Yeah. It wasn't a game of telephone. Were these creatures not really there? I mean,
maybe, but then you see the footprints like what we've shown, and
oh yeah,
I mean that's not exaggerated. I mean,
and that's kind of what I'm getting at is like, there has to be some sort of basis to every culture around the planet having stories of dragons. However, could dragons have just been remnant populations of dinosaurs?
Maybe, but that doesn't explain how so many cultures talked about dragons having the ability to fly or breathe fire.
Maybe they couldn't.
I would be hard pressed to confuse a pteranodon with a dragon.
Well, I mean, think about being the knight that comes back from killing the Titanoboa, right? You find a Titanoboa out in the swamp somewhere, and you kill that thing with your English broadsword, right? And you come back and, oh yeah, I killed a giant snake. Oh, good for you. Cool. Or you come back, oh, this thing, it flew, it breathed fire, and it scorched my armor.
Titanoboa, all we'd have to do is bring the head of that thing back, and people have been like, oh my God!
That's what I'm saying, though, right? It's like if you went out in the field and you killed one.
We'll be taking that.
If you went out in the field and killed one, and then just came back and were like, oh yeah, I killed this thing, Lamau. Everyone's like, okay, cool, yeah, good for you. But if you embellish the story, then it's like, oh.
Think about this. The bombardier beetle basically shoots fire, chemical reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the Sarcosuchus, that big bulb it had on its nose. Nobody really knows what that was for. That could be the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. We don't know what. We can look at bones and say, "Oh yeah, I think that," but it's just like we're talking with our cryptids here. It's a theory. Nobody really knows. Some of these things could have had these abilities, and back then, when you're not, you don't have the help of the internet to look these things up. And say, oh well, this is a so and so, and it does this and this. You see something like that, and you see it do something like that. It's going to be fantastical. And
Sure. Well, look at the
you
horned
know,
lizard, the horny toad, as they call it. They shoot blood out of their eyes.
yeah, how weird would that have been to somebody seeing it for the first time?
The first redneck that saw one in New Mexico or whatever, y'all ain't gonna believe this shit. This thing shoots blood out of his eyes.
I used to catch them when I was a kid when we lived in New Mexico.
Think about the basilisk lizard, the one that can run on water. I mean,
Sure.
think about just being out there on a little cane pole
There you go.
fishing, and all of a sudden this little lizard comes running across the water, and you're like,
And like, and the same thing applies with the stories of the Kraken, right? Imagine the first sailors to encounter an octopus. You know what I mean? They found an octopus attached to the side of the ship and like pry-barred that thing off the side, right? When you get to port, are you going to describe the first octopus ever seen on the side of your ship as this just little lump that you just had to scrape off? Or was it terrifying and scared the whole crew, and the tentacles could wrap around the ship and you narrowly escaped? Like,
Well, look at the size of some of the squid that have been found.
I was about to say, what if it was just a colossal squid? Because we know those exist, and those the 50 something feet.
Right.
I mean,
well, the colossal octopus is gigantic, but you're thinking of the giant squid, the Architeuthis. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then not to go on a tinfoil hat routine. This may be for another show, but look at the DNA of an octopus. They have DNA that's
like
uncommon
nothing
with
else.
anything else in the animal kingdom. Okay, where'd they come from?
where did they go? Where did they come from, Cotton Eye? Sorry.
Imagine being on a ship out there in the middle of the ocean and seeing a Meg for the first time.
Yeah.
That would be a sea monster.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Leviathan. I mean, if we were out there today and we saw that, we would say, "Oh my God, look, it's a megalodon," because we have the the luxury of years of people talking about this, the internet, scientists posting pictures, the jaws being reconstructed. We have all that. They didn't have that. You see a 60+ foot shark swimming around, that's going to scare the bejesus out of them. I mean,
well, there was the fisherman sighting from I think it was Sydney, Australia. There was a group of fishermen. This was about 1909. A group of fishermen fishing from the end of a wharf, and every one of them swore the same thing. They saw a shark swim by that was the length of the wharf, and the wharf was 110 feet long.
Right. Well,
that would be enough to make me never go near the water ever again.
There's still, I believe it's Argentina that the black demon.
Mm-hmm.
That's their reports.
Well, I thought that was the Sea of Cortez.
It might be. I know it's somewhere, but the black demon, it's supposedly reported to be 100 foot plus shark that they've seen.
Even if you point back to Noah's point earlier, when I lived in the Philippines several years ago, they have during the summer the whale sharks will migrate through the area. You can see whale sharks. I had the luxury of being able to see a whale shark when I was down there. I know what a whale shark is. I'm a scientifically minded person, but the first time I saw one, I'm like, holy shit, what is this? And
the size of that damn thing.
Well, granted, it was probably, I don't know, 25, 30 feet long. I don't know how big a whale shark actually is. But seeing it in my little 15-foot boat that I was in, as far as I was concerned, that was a 100-foot long shark.
Yeah, imagine the first guy in like a little rowboat seeing a blue whale.
Right. It's the size of a school bus.
And that would be absolutely terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm pretty sure blue whales dwarf school buses.
Yeah,
well, they may.
Probably,
they may. I don't know
like
what
I've got a heart the
is.
size of a sedan, so I mean, like,
some Inuit villager that's going out on the open water in a kayak to do some fishing, and this thing breaches the surface. I'd say he probably had to rinse that kayak out when he got back.
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
whale sharks,
even in that
feet long. Yeah.
Even in that vein, think about some of these primitive people that during that time being out in little small boats like that, and just seeing an average, 17, 18 foot great white. That is going to be a monster to somebody like that who has never seen anything like that.
I want to briefly touch on something real fast. Speaking of like seeing things for the first time, I want to know what was going through the Inuits' mind the first time they saw an orca just full blown punt a sea lion into the air. Because that's apparently been going on for a long, long time. That orcas just really like punting sea lions for no other reason than they're just assholes. So I mean, like,
orcas are the thugs of the sea.
Imagine you're just some Inuit guy in your little rowboat. You're going out to do some fishing, and you look over. You're like, "Oh yeah, sea lions, hell yeah!" And then one of them's just like,
does the Wilhelm scream as it's spiraling through the air?
Yeah, or even the first time to see a sea lion. You know, when I was on my honeymoon, we got to see Patagonian sea lions, which are sea wolves. You know?
It's just living up to the moniker of the seals: sea, air, and land.
Speaking of Patagonia, Patagonia means land of giants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, growing up in the St. Louis area, you know, I would go to the St. Louis Zoo every year with my parents, and we would go feed the sea lions. And, you know, they're like, 6 feet long or whatever the California sea lions are. Well, like I said, when I was on my honeymoon, my wife and I got to go see Patagonian sea lions. And, you know, they're also called sea wolves. The males are 800 pounds. You know, it is absolutely ridiculous. And I can't imagine seeing one of those things not knowing what it was.
Yeah.
You know, like,
imagine the first person that ever saw a leopard seal.
Yeah.
So kind of roping us back in, touching on what Dad said. There's a lot of stories about Patagon. Like there's a lot of stories about it. Like 1579 Francis Drake, right? His chaplain wrote about seeing people who were 7.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
And the 1590s, a decade later, it was reported as seeing bodies 12 feet long. And then again in the 1590s, a ship rounding Tierra del Fuego reported a violent encounter between his ship's crew and unnaturally tall natives. 8 years later, they reported seeing giants living on the island. The year after that, reported seeing giants on the island. 16 years after that, more reports of seeing giants living on the island. And then all I get from there is in 1766, there was the HMS Dolphin, which had reported seeing a tribe of 9 feet tall natives.
Wow.
So there's a lot of reports from Patagonia and Patagon.
Yeah.
And that's just one area. There are reports from all over the world of people encountering giant tribes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the Kandahar giants, like we talked about earlier. I mean, we're talking in a desert theater. We're finding like there's reports of giants living in caves. I mean, look at the Fomorians, giants who lived in the woods and would sleep in caves and only come out to hunt or sightsee, from what they understand.
Right. Well, the Kandahar giants, I think, is really interesting, given the fact you're talking Afghanistan. The predominant people around there are Middle Eastern looking, and then these are red-headed giants. Where the hell did they come from?
Could they be Fomorians?
I don't know.
Because I mean,
when you
or what the Irish referred to as Fomorians, it have been called other things in other parts of the world.
Well, the fact that they were so different. I mean, at the stereotypical presentation you see in the paintings of like Jesus, for example. I grew up watching King of Kings, and Jesus looked like Jeffrey Hunter, blue eyes, Caucasian looking, whatever. Realistically, this is a Palestinian Jew. He probably looked more like Bin Laden than Jeffrey Hunter. Yep. A red-headed giant.
It's unheard of. It matches nothing in local humans.
So, there's a really large Mick. I mean, where, I can say this because I'm Irish. But
he's there because he heard they had Guinness. And that's why he's so pissed off because there's none there.
It's like, I don't think my people made it to Afghanistan.
Well, I mean, so think about what we were discussing when we were discussing the Sulhulu and a couple other discussions we had. Were at one point some of these tribes allied with these creatures, and thus at one point when the Norse or the Celts were on a bit of a stampede through some places, did they bring a Fomorian with them further south? And then when they left the Fomorian.
Well, I mean, that's a very good theory, because I mean, think about the Philistines. They were not real. I mean, they were average people, but Goliath fought for the Philistines. So having a giant, and I think Steve even said that when go in the bar, pick a bar fight, you want your buddy to be the biggest guy, and Goliath was one of the greatest warriors of that time. So he worked for the Philistines. That's a very, very sound theory to have something like that.
Right.
If you were a tribe or a nation or whatever that was going to go to war, kind of like Persia did. I mean, Persia, when they attacked, they would take the best warriors from where they attacked that were left alive, and they would integrate them into their army. I mean, you think about 300. They even have a couple of giants, depicted in that battle.
Which the Greeks and the Romans also talked about doing battle with giants.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, tactically, that's a sound strategy. You conquer a country, and they've got a lot of big guys. I mean, that's.
Even when you're not talking about giants, we're talking about like when Hannibal went over the Alps, they rode elephants. That's because if you've got a cavalry group mounted on elephants and they're going up against cavalry mounted on horses, little one-sided.
Yeah. And I mean that's something that throughout history, has been exploited. I mean, the English heavy cavalry.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how it decimated, because at that point that was the first heavy mounted cavalry to be used in battle, and look what it did to most of the armies that it came up against. It decimated them because you got heavy mounted cavalry going against people on foot. Not a whole lot of people to be able to do.
If you've got two groups going against each other, and one is mounted on standard horses, and the other are mounted on heavy cavalry horses like Percherons, they're going to get bowled over. I mean, that's even the same species there. They're just mounted on a much bigger, much stronger horse. Noah, David By said that he made a comment that made me think, but he intended it as funny. He says Kandahar giants are so nasty because they're Celts out of whiskey. Red-headed giants, could that not have been, red's always been associated with fire. Could that be the source of the fire giants, the El Jotnar?
I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, so again, that plays into the old classic game of telephone, but it also plays into the terminology for someone with red hair,
Yeah.
Sure. Was it the Muspelheim that had the fire giants?
Mm-hmm. Right, fire giants, Muspelheim.
Well, so, and it also plays into the lost in translation thing too. I mean, what one country calls one thing, and another country doesn't have the word for that, and they make their own word up for it. I think that's the point you're getting at.
Right. And it's not that far-fetched to describe someone who has red hair as hair of fire, or in some languages, linguistically it would make more sense to say, and I don't mean in every language, but in some languages it would make more sense to say their hair was fire instead of their hair was red, only because of the way the articles work with certain languages and the way the language flows.
Well, sure.
Look at French,
different traits, for example.
How they, goldfish. They don't have a translation for goldfish in French is le poisson rouge. Poisson being fish, rouge being red. So the literal translation of goldfish from French to English is fish red. If you look at it and break it down exactly the way it is.
Yeah,
Lots of
and so
translation. Well,
so
like,
for sorry,
like
Steve, go ahead.
potatoes in French, pomme de terre, apple of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look at, and then this is one of the things that makes English such a hard language to learn for non-native speakers, is how many times have we got one word that means 9 things?
Yeah. So I mean, my whole point is like in old Norse, Proto Norse, whatever, however you want to see it, it would be entirely reasonable to say that the giants they saw with, you know, burning fire on their head or whatever could just be lost in translation as, hey, who's the redheaded giant? You
Right.
know?
And
These fire giants could have just been the red giants or the red-headed giants.
and the words for fire and the words for red could have been very similar words and very easily mistranslated.
Or they could have been the same word.
True, could have been the same word.
It's just contextually which one means what.
Like live and live.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Or the
English,
word jam. You know, jam can be, you know, shoving a pool stick in somebody's eye, jam it in their eye, or it can be delicious on toast.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you make a very good point. You know, I was watching a podcast just the other day. They were talking about how, like ancient Egyptians and folks more distant than that, you know, people like 3000 BCE, things like that, they didn't see the color blue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, did that mean that they actually could not see the color blue, or they just didn't have a word for the color blue? You know, they didn't have indigo.
When they started developing dyes, dyes, blue was the most valuable one because it was the hardest to find.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But, you know, how would they describe somebody with blue eyes, for example?
And that
would be completely surreal to them.
That further plays back into what I was saying earlier about the Vikings potentially encountering a Yeti in another land, referring to it as a frost giant or a giant of the frost.
Very good point.
Yeah. And some Bigfoot have been described as having red hair.
Yeah. So I mean, it's entirely reasonable to say that the Vikings could have been encountering these giants, and it's just lost in translation. They were encountering Bigfoot, or they're encountering a Yeti, or they're encountering a Fomorian, or something like that. I mean, like, oh well, let's just describe it so people know what we're talking about. It was giant and had fiery hair, red hair. It wasn't a very common trait with Vikings to have red hair. So, oh, geez, you know, red hair. Oh, what do we describe this as? Okay, fire hair. You know, fire giants.
And you know, it's been debated for a long time that if Grendel from Beowulf wasn't a Bigfoot type creature, so it's not outside the realm of possibility that the Norse were familiar with these things. And even in the Scandinavian countries today, they still have sightings of things like Bigfoot, but they tend to refer to them as ogres or trolls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look at 13th Warrior, the fire vermin. What they saw is a huge dragon coming down the hill, spitting fire.
It was mounted cavalry with torches.
Cavalry carrying torches. But they described it
as a fireworm. That makes me think of Herger's response. I think I'd rather prefer a dragon.
I'd rather prefer a dragon.
I was thinking to kind of touch on Noah's point. Think about like modern like seals,
like
the
or modern, like seals.
U.S. Navy.
Well, I'm thinking of the animals, the seals, but seals and sea lions. There's been stories of sailors describing mermaids, you know, and the scientific name for seals and sea lions comes back from the same word as siren or mermaids. You know, you've got a European sailor who's never seen a California sea lion, and all of a sudden he's seen one. Okay, now what are we calling it? You know?
Yeah.
Or
Now,
sea lions could have taught pirates how to talk. Our
New theory: are sea lions just immortal pirates?
or
oh Lord.
You know, I read it. I
we're
read
breaking
something
new
about that.
ground all the time on this show.
This is totally off topic, but I read something in some of the early pirate films they did in Hollywood. There was one actor that could not remember his lines, so whenever his line would come up and he wouldn't know what to say, he'd just go "Arr!" And that's how that got associated with pirates. But it's not something they said.
Yeah, mostly when it came to pirates, they spoke an amalgamation of every major sailing language. You know, they would
What they
have,
call a patois.
yeah, they would have Portuguese spackled in with Spanish and English, and it was just crude. Like, I mean, that's genuinely how it was, because
Sure.
aboard a pirate ship, it was, are you able-bodied? Okay, you may not be fully able-bodied, but you can do this job, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. Oh, we don't speak the same language? Okay, well, I might pick up a few of your words and you might pick up a few of mine, but for the most part, I'm just going to point.
Until they
I was
started
thinking of,
coming to an understanding.
Right, exactly.
I was thinking
Nick's
of
got a good point.
Elizabethan language. I was watching a podcast on Shakespeare one time, and they were talking about they're performing Shakespeare in the native tongue that Shakespeare would have spoken, and they sounded like pirates. I was like, oh my God, it's like the guy sounds like Barbarossa from the Pirates of the Caribbean. But that's the English that was spoken at the time.
Nick says, considering giants and Bigfoot, would it be reasonable to assume that the Enkidu be in the same category as Bigfoot giant in the Epic of Gilgamesh? I wouldn't see why not. I mean, the descriptions are very similar. And if I remember correctly, Enkidu is described as being not only massive, but covered in hair, like a wild beast. So, yeah, it's very possible Enkidu could have been considered a Bigfoot type creature.
I mean, he's
So was
even
Brenda.
described as a wild man. I mean, like, it stands to reason that we could be talking about a similar creature, or the same creature even.
Stephen Taylor says, how long would you have to be at sea to think that a sea lion is a beautiful woman? Yeah, I've been lonely, but I've never been that lonely.
Well, I was just thinking that the description of the hair-covered gigantic beast, was that the description we got of Northwood's ex-wife earlier?
Sounds
Yeah,
like my
you're
ex-fiance,
right.
too.
If you're still on, we love you, Northwoods.
Definitely.
Uh,
Mike from Abnormal's heading out for the night. Mike, thanks for being here.
Mike,
Boys,
take it easy.
we're at the 2.5 hour mark. We should probably start wrapping things up too.
Truth.
It is getting rather late, and as the poet once said, I have things to do, promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. So folks, I hope we've managed to give you something to think about, if nothing else. Again, nobody here is an expert. Nobody claims to be an expert, and be very, very cautious of anybody in this field, be it cryptids or even conspiracy theories or any of these fields that we discuss. Be very wary of anybody that claims they are an expert, because odds are really good. They're full of it, and they're trying to sell you something. There are no experts here. There's just a lot of opinions and us expressing theories that we think might fit the bill. And I've got to say, my hat's off to Steve, because those multiple combinations of DNA is something I never even considered. If that's possible throughout the animal world, that could be a fantastic explanation on how some of these creatures developed so massively. It would explain why Bigfoot would have much denser bone, much thicker muscle, and much more powerful physique, and even the possibility of them having a considerably different metabolism if they don't need to eat as much, if their metabolism's slower than ours.
If you think about it, DNA is what a gene does in the basic sense of the word is it codes for a protein. Okay, if you got multiple copies of the DNA, it's like multiple assembly lines in a factory. You're coding for multiple copies of this protein. If we would argue the proteins are the building blocks of life, it's a lot more building material. It makes sense. It's kind of a scary thought, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Dude, thank you so much. Trust
Holy
Jesus.
hell.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
We
Holy
really
hell.
appreciate that. Thank you so much. I completely lost my train of thought. Now I'm kind of flabbergasted. Thank you so much for that. They are awesome. I want to say a big shout out to all the moderators. The moderators have done a fantastic job tonight. I also want to thank everybody that's been in the crowd to, talking about this with us. Again, like I said, all we're doing is postulating ideas and theories. Appreciate you guys sharing your ideas with us. Somewhere in the middle may be the truth. We don't know for sure, and we may never know. But I think more knowledge is out there, and I think the government has been suppressing it for some reason. Maybe because of religious reasons, maybe because of God knows, causing panic in the public. There are lots of reasons why they would suppress it, but at this point in our history, I think there's enough of us now that we could handle the idea of there being a race of giants out there that occasionally eat us. There's enough humans where we could band together and take care of the problem if they got too frisky. We've got the technology to deal with threats that big. So I don't understand why they don't just go, yes, we discovered this a long time ago. No, we didn't reveal it because we thought the public wasn't ready for this kind of information. I could accept that. But like I said, we've discussed some really interesting theory, and there's a lot more to discuss. Well, there may be another giant show in the not so distant future as we find more images like the ones Robbie and I were showing of the footprints cast in stone. As we dig more information, I wouldn't mind maybe planning on bringing Tombstone on for that show to talk about giants in Australia. But I think there's definitely another show, maybe even a couple of shows in just what we can continue to dig up on giants.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think there's a lot more that we can touch on, because I mean, like, really, I didn't go into much, if any, of the lore on Fomorians. Like, I briefly touched on what they do, and there's a lot of lore on them.
Well, there's a lot of Irish legend that's relevant on some of the modern cryptozoological studies, like Cuchulainn.
Mhm.
I think that bears exploration as well. There's just a lot of these old lores, these old histories, these old oral traditions, both from Native Americans and from other previous civilizations like the Celts and the Vikings and other civilizations around the world, where they've encountered things like this, where they've documented things like this. And I think we've been too quick as a society to just brush away or dismiss those that came before us, especially Native American or native tribes of whatever continent, including the Aborigines of Australia. We've been too quick to just dismiss native folklore, and sometimes it's bit us in the ass. We dismissed the native lore in the Congo region when they said there was a giant killer ape out there that attacked and killed lions. And of course, the British Museum, oh no, that couldn't possibly exist. 1999, National Geographic showed otherwise. The Billy ape is real. And it proved that native legend that they thought was just native hokum and not worth exploring was very true. And it could explain why some of those old early explorations, those old missions that went into the Congo looking to map didn't come back. There's a lot of expeditions that went into various places of the world and just gone.
Yeah, they call them savages, but that doesn't mean that they knew less than we did.
Right. We are too quick to dismiss knowledge that has been brought forth by elders and by indigenous people. I think there is a great deal we could learn if we would just listen. And never underestimate the value of listening. It costs you nothing. I mean, and one of the best tools I've ever had and best results I've ever yielded going out doing cryptid investigations was just finding a place in the woods and being quiet. because sometimes the answers you're looking for are just waiting for you to listen. So, folks, thank you guys so much for spending the night with us. We've had a wonderful evening. I've had a fantastic time talking about this. And again, I think we've just scratched the surface on giants, and I want to do one on dragons as well, because there's a lot of lore out there on dragons. Oh, yep, got a Kenai sighting.
He was
We got it.
literally scratching at my foot because he was afraid he missed the meeting.
He's like,
So,
hey, get me up there.
Kenai says hello.
He took a break from stealing your whoopee to come say hi.
Pretty much, yeah. The only thing more important than Whoopi is the DAX Machina show. So, with you, bud.
Well, before we sign off, I know this is kind of an Ozarks howdy, but or Ozarks good night. But Robbie, tell us about what's really out there.
What's really out there, or DAX Machina Light. Same kind of stuff that we talk about here, we talk about there. Just a little bit shorter version. Kind of been slack on things because of soccer and Taylor and Tyler moving out and Norm on his new shift and Johnny. But we've got a couple of episodes that have been recorded that we're just trying to get finishing up editing. I think we did our last show that we got up is about movie monsters, and that was a longer show than we normally do. That was a little bit over an hour. That's because me and Johnny just started talking about all kinds of stuff and just wouldn't shut up. But it's just a nice little round table discussion like we do here, except just recorded instead of live. We try to go look through the facts of whatever we're looking at and try to rule out what's able to be ruled out and go from there. Go check us out. We're on YouTube. What's really out there? Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, all. We got our email address. If you got a story that you want us to look into, is what's really out there 2022@gmail.com. Check us out. If you like this show, you'll probably like the show that we do. That's pretty much it. Unless I forgot something. Did I forget anything, DA?
I think you covered the bases. Make sure you guys go by and like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're checking out his channel, make sure to go by and swing by William Nighthawk's new channel as well. Give them a like and subscribe as well. And Noah, before we go, you want to give us the Jorgamunder spiel?
If I can get through without yawning again, we'll see. We'll see. Hi everybody, I'm Jorgamunder. I stream on Twitch 5 out of 7 days of the week. The days that I don't go live are Wednesdays and Saturdays, which are incidentally the same days that he goes live. So it makes it to where I can be here and goof off with you guys. But instead of being live for 2 hours, I'm live for 6 hours every night. Because it's my entire job. But we play games, we chill out and talk, hang out, just goof off. We don't discuss a lot of cryptids and horror stuff, so that we tend to leave that for these guys. That's not everything we do. We just kind of have a good time, vibe out, good people, good company, all that good stuff. But I'm over on Twitch whenever I live stream. We post videos on YouTube every week, and if you guys want to come swing by, it'd be nice to see you. Nailed it. Made it through without yawning. Let's go, baby.
There we go. Awesome. Well, folks, I will do my best to make sure the show for Wednesday night is up with more lead time than I've been getting them up here lately. I've had a lot going on. I will try to make sure I get everything scheduled well in advance so everybody can set their reminders. So maybe we will have shows this Wednesday and Saturday. I will have them posted as soon as I get the chance. Don't forget to check out the channels we mentioned. Give them likes and subscribes and shares. And one thing I forgot to mention about that, and I think Noah forgot to mention, is if you have an Amazon Prime account, which I know a lot of us do, you automatically have a free subscription that you can subscribe to a channel on twitch.tv. So if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can go to twitch.tv and subscribe to Noah's channel for free. It's a monthly subscription, comes free with your Amazon Prime account, doesn't cost you a nickel. And it does help his channel a lot. So I'm sure he'd greatly appreciate that.
Speaking of,
boys,
I need to use y'all's because I
Yeah,
forgot to do it on the first.
Need to do it on the first. Yeah, folks, you guys, boys, you got anything else you want to add?
No, I feel left out. I don't have a channel to hawk here, guys. You know, I'm just.
Make sure to check out Steve's Pub and Grub.
Yeah, there you go.
Now in South Africa.
No, South Africa. Don't go looking for it in Fort Leonard Wood. You won't find it.
And just remember that I just finished the manuscript for Dark Frontier's first hunt. It's in edits right now, and hopefully I might be close to having release information by the time we do the show on Wednesday. Depends on how long it takes me to get through the edits, because like I said, I want to make sure this one's good. I want to make it fantastic, because I think you folks are really going to enjoy it. I'll show off the cover one more time. I'm really proud of this cover. Adam did a great job. I'm pretty proud of this one. I'm always proud of the new books, but this is the first book of a new series, and I can't wait to share it with you folks. I think you guys are really
buy the book or the dog gets it.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. He's my bud. It's my best friend, Aaron.
So, folks, thank you guys for hanging out with us on this Saturday night. I hope the rest of your weekend is awesome. Thank you guys so much for all the people that gave us super chats and donos tonight. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And just folks, remember that we don't have fans, we have friends. This is just a group of friends sitting and talking about ideas about cryptids and other things that go bump in the night. And we're proud to be here and sharing ideas with you folks. So again, if there's anything you take away from this, that nobody here claims to be an expert, we're just sharing our ideas and our theories. And just keep that in mind if you run across somebody that claims that they are. Hope you guys have a great time. Remember, stories are journeys that we take together, and I appreciate each and every one of you for taking this journey with us. So I hope you have a wonderful night and a wonderful rest of your weekend. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAX Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.